plausible, do you?
So the information that was shared from the Dutch meeting was referenced within that first SAG?
It was. Why is there no reference to it in the minutes?
The meeting was recorded. I'm not sure as to the comprehensive nature of the minutes. I think the recording would probably be helpful.
You're telling me, so we can see that recording, can we?
All the SAG minutes and any recordings are within the sort of purview of Birmingham City Council. So certainly I would suggest it would be a really good idea to have those so that you can either listen to them or look at them. Because I would be absolutely certain that there'll be more in listening to it than there will be in
Birmingham City Council are giving us evidence in the next session.
Than looking at a couple of the minutes.
You agree with me, it's surprising there's no reference in the SAG minutes to them. Do you agree with me?
Personally, I think the comment that you make is a fair comment. With regards to what was recorded in those minutes, Mike wasn't there, I wasn't there. I don't know the custom and practice of what is recorded or what isn't, or whether they rely on an audio recording. I'm really not sure of that particular element of the process.
Okay.
But I think the point you make is a fair one, but as the Chief Inspector's just said, it was discussed. I don't know the rationale behind how those words have got into those minutes.
Thank you.
I can't help you with that bit.
Okay. Well, we'll return that to that with City Council.
I'll bring Joni Reid in quickly.
Have you read the minutes?
We've read a lot.
Have you read the minutes in which the decision was made? So how did you weren't aware that the intelligence or information wasn't included in those minutes upon which the decision to ban vans was decided?
I think there was an awful lot discussed in the SAG. I wasn't present.
But the information, which was later claimed as the significant intelligence emerged, you haven't noted that wasn't included in the minutes upon when the decision was made.
Can I just step in and answer that? You know, I think that is a situation whereby the officers that go to the SAG give the information and things are discussed in the SAG. But with regards to, you know, have we then gone back and retrospectively checked everything that was said in the SAG? You know, the straight answer to that would be no, we haven't done that.
After the Prime Minister raises the issue publicly and you have to come to the Home Affairs Select Committee twice, you haven't read the minutes.
No, I'm not saying...
Where the decision was made.
Sorry, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
To be clear, what I'm trying to explain is that we wouldn't necessarily, I would assume it's not custom and practice to go through the minutes immediately after the SAG if the officers have attended the SAG and they've given all the information to the SAG. But with regards to this process itself, with all the things that we've prepared, we've looked at the minutes, and also as part of the process that we've been undertaking, that there is a judicial review process, a stage at which we're at, which we've gone and we've listened to the actual recordings as well. But I think it would be very advantageous for you as members of the committee to secure, you know, a copy of that recording.
We'll ask the council at the next session, but just for clarity, this is my understanding. The minutes of that SAG meeting on the 7th of October, which Paul is referring to, was where the decision was made to ban Israeli fans, and it refers to an absence of intelligence. On the 8th of October, our understanding is that the chair of the SAG notified you that a clearer rationale for that and for the decision to ban Israeli fans was required. And then on the 16th of October, significant intelligence emerged in the form of the information / intelligence as a result of this phone call, all of which happened before the meeting on the 7th of October, and it was never discussed. Is that your position?
You've asked 3 or 4 things at the same time there. Can we just break those down? Do you want to talk about the SAG?
So I think it's a very fair observation. The one thing I would say, however, is Chief Inspector Wilkinson and the Silver Commander were present in the first SAG, and my understanding is that the information was briefed into the SAG. The fact it's not reflected in the minutes is unhelpful, but that's something, again, we need to discuss with Birmingham City Council. You then reference that intelligence emerges. I think my assessment would be that information intelligence came into this operation from when the fixture was announced in the end of August, all the way through September, October into November. So I took command of this on the 17th, and you can clearly see in the timeline...
17th of
October.
October, thank you.
You can clearly see from the beginning of this operation in a timeline, so we've briefed a lot into HMIC, FRS, etc. You can see a constant flow of information intelligence coming into the operational environment, being assessed by intelligence operatives and creating intelligence sit reps. I understand I don't know what you're implying around the intelligence emerges, but there is a reality that
I'll
information
tell you exactly
and
what
intelligence...
I mean. On the 7th of October, it was minuted that there was an absence of intelligence, quote, an absence of intelligence. Then the SAG chair notifies you that you need a clearer rationale for the decision to ban Israeli fans. Mm-hmm. And that was required for legal reasons. And then on the 16th, the information stroke intelligence is provided in the form of the minutes or whatever of this phone call, or recollection of the phone call from what happened with the Dutch police on the 1st of October.
Yeah.
Why wasn't it referred to on the 7th of October?
I think it was.
Assistant Chief Constable, if
this
it was...
This is not credible. It's not credible. The decision upon which the decision was made was not minuted at all.
I bring Paul Kohler in.
Assistant Chief Constable, if you think it was referred to, you get this email on the 9th of October saying we need a clearer rationale. What did you do when you received that email?
I wasn't in command at that point. Forgive me, I took command from the 17th. But fundamentally, I think organisationally, I think what the SAG chair was trying to do, was he understood the contentious nature of this decision. My view is, from reviewing the operational progress of the information intelligence, was he wanted to ensure that we were all very clear what the information intelligence was suggesting, and therefore what the preference or the recommendation from the police was.
Are you aware of this email of the 9th of October?
I am.
When did you see it?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Probably in November, December.
Okay. And Chief Constable Guildford?
Only when we've been reviewing this.
Sorry?
Only when we've been in the review.
So an email comes in to senior officers in Westminster Midlands Police saying we need a clearer rationale after supposedly we think it's been discussed and clearly you've talked about this pivotal moment, and no one says, well, hold on, we had a SAG 2 days ago where we discussed it. Did no one say that? Did no one return to that point?
Well, I think what I need to be clear on is that whenever anything came in from the SAG, the Gold Commander that was in charge at the time responded to the request that came in. My sense of it, because I wasn't at the SAG, is very much along the lines of discussions took place, information was shared, but I think the SAG chair then requested that something of a written document was just bear with me a sec. A written document was required to set everything out. I think that's what was required. But when it comes to
not ask for a document, ask for a clearer rationale, i.e. there was no rationale at that point.
I don't think that was the case. I think the officers that went there participated in that process, and the SAG chair listened to what was said. It was discussed at the SAG, and following that, a couple of days later, I think that request came out, and then you can see in the chronology, we then sent, I think, more of a written document which set out some further detail. Mm-hmm. But please, you know, for the purposes of what we are trying to get to the bottom of, what you are trying to get to the bottom of, it will probably be important to ask the SAG around that, because I wasn't there and ACC O'Hara wasn't there.
Okay, thank you. Lord Mann's report. In the last session, you told us that we did not have sight of it. Is that entirely accurate?
Yes, it never was sent to ourselves.
Never. Then why is it referenced in the community impact assessment bizarrely, something which is not about the community, despite what you told me a few minutes ago, but it's referenced in the community impact assessment. Why have you not had sight of it?
Yeah, well,
So with the community meeting on the 20th of October, which took place in the evening, that was referenced by a community member, a Jewish community member, about Lord Mann's report. And the Community Bronze Chief Inspector Tim Robinson made a note of the feedback from the community and put it into the CIS.
It was circulated. It was
No,
it says here circulated.
Yeah, that is what was said by the member of the community in the community meeting.
So the community impact assessment says it was circulated, and you're saying it doesn't mean it was circulated. What does it mean?
So I was present in the community meeting on the evening of the 20th of October, and a member of the community, in the community meeting that took place at police headquarters, referenced that Lord Mann's report had been circulated. That was noted by our Chief Inspector.
Why do you note doubts to the report's accuracy and whether it's a bit late? What's all that about? Why were there doubts about its accuracy at that point?
I don't know.
That's in there. It's recorded in this document, but you don't know why.
Oh, I imagine that would be the assessment of the Community Bronze Commander.
Turning to what happened in Amsterdam, do you stand by what you said to us last time about what happened in Amsterdam?
yeah, the evidence that we gave last time.
You stand by all those things you said happened, even though it's contradicted by the Dutch police, by contemporaneous evidence, by media evidence. You still stand by all those things. I have a list of 11 things you told us which are disputed. Are you telling us you still stand by what was said?
I was really clear last time in what I said, and the Chief Inspector is sitting next to me who had the conversation. And I told you very clearly that I didn't doubt his integrity, and the information that we've provided in the 8 points in the letter, Chair, that you asked me to respond to since the first appearance, I've provided all that information to you. And I do stand by what was said. It was said on the basis of the information that was given to ourselves.
So Maccabi fans attack taxi drivers. You still hold with that?
In specific reference to the taxi driver, yes, I do still hold that. And I've actually, in preparation for today, I've seen that in one of the first community impact assessments, and remember Lord Mann mentioned something about taxi drivers and said, well, actually, it was the other way round. In his articulation, it was a taxi driver that was being attacked or allegedly attacked, or somebody dragged out of a taxi who was a Jewish member of the public. In the CST information that we've got that I've read as part of today, a taxi's mentioned twice. That incident is mentioned, but also there was an incident on the evening before which would imply that the taxi was attacked because it was, let's say, possibly a member of a different community. So this issue around the taxi, I think, and that was the information we got from the CST, one of the very first bits of information that they provided us with. So it mentioned 2 taxi incidents, one on the evening the day before and one on the day of the actual fixture.
Yeah, can you send that to us?
I think we have, but yes, we've got that, yeah.
You still hold over 5,000 Dutch police deployed. You still hold to that, do you?
No, I remember when that was discussed at the beginning with the Chair and with Lord Mann and ourselves. The 5,000 was our assumption as to what were the inputs over those 3 or 4 days of the policing operation. Because I think the Dutch said more than 2,000 on just the day of the operation itself.
They said 1,200 were deployed. They said 1,200.
Sorry?
They said 1,200.
Sorry, I thought it was nearer to 2,000, but the 5,000 was a planning assumption from the Silver, which we discussed right at the beginning of when
made up, in fact,
the evidence
in
was
reality.
given. That's not right to say it was made up, no. That's not right. That's really not fair. It was a professional assumption of what would be required over the period of days. And I think I remember yourself and Mr. Mann having that conversation at the beginning of the evidence. Chair.
I think what we were saying that may be a way that you came up with a 5,000 number, but it isn't it's a finger in the air hoping to get to a calculation that might possibly work, rather than actually having any concrete
No, definitely not. No, it's
basis.
just a professional estimate as to how many officers.
You didn't check it with the Amsterdam police. You didn't go back and say, if we say 5,000, that's correct in terms of the...
No, we didn't. That was just the assumption that we've made based on 4 days.
So you don't know whether the
worth
1,200 was 1,200 on one day or 1,200 over the full period?
No, I assumed from having spoken to the Silver Commander that the number itself was on the day of the actual event. And I think it was more towards the 2,000 than the 1,200. I know some of that, those figures have been disputed, as you quite rightly say, but no, that was our assumption.
You still hold the line that no AI tools were used in the preparation?
Yeah, I've just got a note about that as well, because in your letter you asked as well around the some of the background of the information and the intelligence which we've provided, and there was a definite note that we've got to the bottom of in terms of the West Ham game, and I think the summation, I think in the House, it was a question that was asked in the House, was that, you know, you've used AI, or West Midlands may have used AI on this particular occasion. We don't do that. We don't use the AI. The West Ham side of things and how we gain that information was one of the officers in producing the report. Usually they would go to, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Mark, they would go to a system which has sort of reports, intelligence reports that all the football officers use over the country of previous games. They didn't find any relevant information within the searches that they made for that, and then they basically Googled, you know, when was the last time, and that's how the information came to be. So
Google
the
AI.
I don't
The AI
think,
function on Google, is it?
I'm told, I'm being really candid here, I'm told that they just did a Google search on that because they couldn't find it in the normal system. And as it transpires, as I've said and make really clear, that information was wrong. And I've apologized.
We know that. We've gone through that. But why was your officer Googling?
But we haven't routinely used AI.
Why was your officer Googling to find information? If he looked in the usual place, there wasn't any. Why didn't he stop at that point? Why did he start Googling to try and find something?
Because when you do one of these assessments, I'm fairly convinced that when you produce it, you look at when an event has last taken place. You try and find the information as to when it last happened. And you go to the football system, and usually it tells you. But because these teams hadn't played for so very long, I don't think the information was in the system. Is that right?
There's still, we've double-checked, there is no information held in relation to Maccabi playing in this country on the national football system, which clearly they've played, but there was clearly no incidents that were recorded.
Isn't that your answer?
Yeah,
there were no
none.
incidents. Well, rather than accepting that, you went, we'll find it somewhere else.
Can I take? I want to get away from. I'm getting bogged down in detail. There's a few other points we need to make.
I just want to come in on the accuracy of your reporting, because in the SAG minutes of the 16th of October, there was a discussion about the risk in reference to the different football fans. When talking about the Maccabi fan base, incidents in Italy, Norway and Holland were referenced, but none of these incidents involved Maccabi fans. For example, in Italy, it involved Beata Jerusalem. In Norway, it involved the Israeli national football team. And in Holland, it is the Israeli baseball team. And in fact, both of them was pro-Palestine protest rather than Israeli fan bad behaviour. So you're using evidence that did not actually relate to Maccabi Tel Aviv to highlight a risk to the community, which I don't think actually existed.
Can I also ask, you stated that Lord Mann had said that a Jewish person was dragged out of a taxi as part of his report. Can you point to exactly where that's said? Because we've been through the reports and we can't find that.
Can I assist on that, Chair?
Thank you.
So I've obviously seen Lord Mann's report. He references on the first page of the report at point 3, there was an altercation with a taxi driver that resulted in Israeli fans attacking a small number of taxis at the same location. The event dissipated quickly as the taxi drove off. So that is referencing...
It doesn't say a Jewish person was dragged out of a taxi.
No,
I've got it
I've just read
here.
exactly what he said.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
In terms of
Yes,
international systems, so as I say, bearing in mind those two fixtures were played some time ago, but if there's any instance of note, match reports are filed on the intelligence systems, they would have been available. In terms of any current intelligence, we would also check with other countries where you can imagine, to try and find out if they've relevant intelligence. So we broke the contact between West Midlands Police and the Dutch National Police. Subsequent to that, we'd do the checks. Obviously, there was the incident with the Tel Aviv derby, which came out partway through this process.
Say that was after the decision was taken.
Yes, that was after the decision.
And
then there was a further incident.
Yes, and it wasn't the Maccabi fans, was it? It was
I'm sorry. I think the reports were that it was at the Maccabi, and forgive me, the other Tel Aviv clubs, the derby, and the report that was disorder there, and it was reported by the Israeli police as being serious disorder.
I mean, the game was called off, wasn't it? It was afterwards, yes.
That was after the decision, but while it was before the game.
Yes. Okay.
Can I? If I found the reference, if you want.
Okay, please.
Do you want to go first, and then I'll.
Yeah.
Just the taxi
I asked
thing.
the question about why we're using different incidents of football involving violence where Israelis were involved as a way to highlight the threat that Maccabi Tel Aviv fans played into the community.
It feels to us, from everything we've seen, that there was a need that you felt that you had to justify banning these fans, and that scraping was done to find a reason.
Right. Well, that's absolutely not the case. I'm really sorry if it comes across in that way. That was absolutely not the case. The information, the intelligence that we received, that we documented, and we've shared absolutely all of that with HMIC FRS very, very recently, was all gone through. The mistake that was made in terms of the West Ham was one individual doing one Google search because he couldn't find the reference because it wasn't there within the system. But do you want to just answer that question?
I've just got a couple of points just to try and help a little bit if possible. So open source research is not unusual in police information and intelligence gathering, and it's specifically called out in the public order, public safety, authorised professional practice as good practice to do online open source research. So that is not unusual. This was briefed into the first gold meeting very early on, and at that point, from everything that I've read, West Midlands Police were planning on receiving Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. So at that point, the reference, almost the implication that was erroneously searched for to try and build evidence to justify it's not a fair reflection of the reality. The open source research is good practice. It incorporates the broader understanding for your threat assessment. So the open source research was a mistake, and that has been called out. AI was not used. Just in relation to the point you raised, forgive me, again, my understanding is, and I wasn't at the SAG, but my understanding from the SAG was that they discussed the full range of risks, and that included the risk from pro-Palestinian protests. So my understanding is that if you look at the intelligence picture and the information develop over time, it was clear that there were people locally who were very unhappy about Maccabi Tel Aviv coming to Birmingham, and that there were threats, and there was information intelligence of those threats. So we had the rising tide of concern locally, and then we had the additional information about Maccabi Tel Aviv and the potential threat of them attacking community members as opposed to rival fans. And those two things together, I think, presented a reasonable position for the police to say, we want to protect the public. And this was about a reasonable decision to try to protect the public.
Can I bring Joni Reid in?
It's a question specifically for Mr. Roberts. We've heard a lot about Lord Mann's report. It's one quite concrete piece of research on the actual football team that we are discussing. When you received the report from Lord Mann, what did you do with it?
So first of all, I will say I've had a dialogue with Lord Mann over a number of years. It's always been a very positive dialogue. I think he always comes from a motivated point of view of the fans' perspective, and that's not just over the issues involving Israeli fans, particularly around disabled fans. Is a real champion, so I'll listen to Lord Mann and we have a good dialogue. That said, in terms of the report, it was marked private and confidential. I made a number of attempts to try and arrange a meeting with him. There were 2 meetings arranged, and I offer no criticism. He's a busy man and things happen, and I understand there was a technology failure on at least one occasion. But we never actually managed to speak, despite a number of attempts to try and speak to him. As I offer it as no criticism, because I speak to Lord Man a lot, and I think he quite enjoys speaking to me on occasions. When I look at his report and the relevance of it to the risk assessment process in this particular case, the salient point, and it's been brought out already, the distinction between intelligence and information. The relevant intelligence in this was the narrative around what happened on the night with Amsterdam. That was superseded with first-hand evidence by West Midlands Police speaking directly to the Dutch police. The rest of it is a narrative and an opinion by Lord Man, some of which I agree with, some of which I disagree with. So as such, it would fall into the category of information. So it won't be something that I fed into the risk assessment process, because I think the relevant element was superseded, as I say, by the conversation with the Dutch National Police.
Thank you. So on the intelligence gathering operation then, could you just give us a quick overview of, other than the conversation that you had with the Dutch police and the Googling, what official documents you analysed that fed into your risk matrix?
Yeah, so because of the nature of the football fixture, and this is not normally the case for a normal football fixture, you wouldn't necessarily identify an intelligence bronze commander. So in effect, you have somebody who's an intelligence professional whose role is to collate and gather all sources of information and intelligence to help inform a threat assessment on behalf of the commander. That then comes by way of, I think it was a weekly sit rep actually, I don't know whether that increased nearer to the fixture, but in effect the intelligence operatives create a document that is considered by the gold and silver commanders within their meetings and the use of the national decision making model. And that contains sensitive intelligence, intelligence flows from a range of sources.
Specifically, what do you think was the kind of clincher, other than the conversation that you had with the Dutch police and the open AI Googling information?
I wouldn't say there was a clincher. I think it was very clear from looking at the information intelligence flow and the feedback from community.
Talk about this intelligence flow. I'm just trying to get a sense of what that intelligence flow and information actually looks like, because from everything that we've read and seen, it boils down to one conversation that wasn't minuted, and some inaccurate information about the football team in question. So can you put us right then? I mean, I'm giving you the opportunity. Tell us what the information and
intelligence
was.
comes in a range of forms. People giving information and intelligence, which is then assessed and sanitised, and it's then looked to be triangulated and corroborated. It's given a handling code, and then it's listed.
I'm not asking about the process. I don't want to know about the process. I'm actually asking for specific bits of information and intelligence. If you're saying to me that we are not entitled to that, or that it's private and confidential, please do say that.
What I'm just trying to do is be cautious about how I speak, because, so for example,
being very cautious.
Thank you. There is something around, so in policing you have informants, for example. In policing you have technical feed, you have a range of sources of information intelligence online, chatter from people, human intelligence sources. So you have a range of intelligence that comes together that is then overlaid with a range of professional judgment.
Thank you.
Can I help you just a little bit with that? Because I think I sort of see where you're coming from. The types of intelligence, obviously you get intelligence from the community, from individuals, and that intelligence is fed into the system, but it's made in the form of intelligence reports. And we received a number of those intelligence reports off different people, which fed in to what Mike has just been receiving. So in terms of like, what are they? You know, I think that's what you're getting at.
I'll tell you what I'm struggling with, right? I'll tell you what I'm struggling with. The main source of intelligence is from a private conversation with the Dutch police, which they have, which they are denying the contents of, which they have publicly doubled down on since this news was published. That's your main source of intelligence, and that you're willing to share publicly that the Dutch police have effectively lied to their public and their press, but you're not willing to tell us the other sources of information. So it appears that that is really the only intelligence and information that you received,
So
and that the decision was based solely on that, and that we can corroborate because the Dutch police have said that it's categorically not true. So I'm trying to get a sense of what this decision was based on.
Can I just offer a view as kind of relatively objective, as far as it can be, given I'm sat on this side of the table? But I made the reference point to the tipping point in the review, because up until the intelligence from the Dutch police and briefing that we've discussed, it was fairly clear to me that West Midlands Police were fully working on the basis that they were going to host the Israeli fans, the Maccabi fans. There were contingencies in place and they were exploring them. And it had some similarities to operations I've looked at in the past where there was considered high risk. I've got to say, I've been national lead for 11 years, and before that, 5 years in GMP, handling most of the big events there, and this is a unique situation.
How many times have away fans been denied access to?
Rare occasions. I think we came close to a decision around Ajax fans, ironically, a number of years ago as a result of their behaviour. We came, personally, my closest experience was the first time Glasgow Rangers played in Manchester after the, you may remember the European Europa League final where there was a riot in Manchester.
I remember it well.
Remember it well. The next time Glasgow Rangers got drawn to play in Manchester was against Manchester United, and there were real concerns there, and one of the options we considered was banning Glasgow Rangers fans. The accommodation we reached there was that they all went to Wigan. They in effect had a fan zone at Wigan and were only given their tickets once they got on the coaches to Manchester.
I think there was a proposal here to have a fan zone in Walsall, wasn't
Absolutely.
there? Yeah.
So that's the parallel I see, where we had all the Glasgow Rangers fans go. It was by consent. We don't really have a power to do it by coercion. Glasgow Rangers worked with the authorities, and in effect they all met. They were fans groups. We roughly knew who they were. They got the ticket on the way to Old Trafford, and they were escorted straight to the ground and straight out. That's the closest parallel I can think to this. And in the preparations for this event, West Midlands Police looked at an option to use a local football ground to try and do something. So I think it was clear that from the initial point up until the point of the Dutch intelligence, the plan was to host the fans. I think the tipping point is referred to there. It's the Dutch intelligence where there's clearly a shift. In terms of corroboration, I take the point about casting doubt on what the Dutch have said and whether the Dutch have kind of recanted on that. But there is clearly corroboration because I think it's agreed by everyone that there was an incident where a Palestinian flag was ripped down. There was an incident where there was a disturbance around a taxi, and there was some pretty appalling chanting. Equally, we know there were attacks on Jewish fans.
There's, I think, 400 stuck in a casino, weren't there?
Yeah, there was attacks, and it appeared to be based on race, and it wasn't typical of football violence. For me, the distinction here was that we normally plan for away fans and their risk fans, ultras, people call things different names, to seek disorder with rival fans from the home team. The difference here, from the intelligence reading, was there was a threat that some of the Maccabi fans might seek confrontation with the local community. Now, in terms of additional intelligence, and I won't go into the sensitivities, I'll leave it to West Midlands to discuss it if they wish to, but clearly there was chatter on social media where there was evidence that the some of the Maccabi fans, or people purporting to be Maccabi fans, were gloating in effect about what had gone on, and that was being responded to by others who were saying about the reaction. So I think that was the distinguishing dynamic that made this different, and genuinely this is a unique set of circumstances.
A number of questions. I'm going to bring in Peter Prinsley, Paul Kohler, Robbie Moore, and then back to Joe.
Thank you. I'm Peter Prinsley. I'm the MP for Bury St Edmunds and Stowmarket, and thank you for coming again today. So at lunchtime today, the Times has published a report from David Brown, the chief news correspondent, who has said that there's been an internal police report which said that the police received high confidence intelligence on the 5th of September that elements of the West Midlands community were planning to arm themselves. And did the police receive intelligence that there were locals that were actually hostile to this that would in fact be causing the trouble? Is this something that you were aware of? Where does this information come from? It's just been published at lunchtime today.
I think that was the point I was going to raise, just around the broader intelligence flow. I understand your concern that the only thing maybe the police focused on was the information from the Dutch. It absolutely wasn't. So we were very clear that there was a huge degree of consternation from the community around the arrival of Maccabi Tel Aviv, and that as a direct result of that concern, we got a lot of information and intelligence to suggest that people were going to actively seek out Maccabi Tel Aviv fans and would seek violence towards them. So we had sort of like a bubbling position locally, and then we had the information about Maccabi Tel Aviv and the assessment from the Dutch commanders.
You could have managed that in the way that we've been discussing with the Glasgow Rangers fans and kept in very restricted places, coaches in, not being allowed to go out into the local community. That could have been managed.
That could be managed, absolutely right. And there are a range of options available to all commanders when they are trying to police a range of risks. However, as the Chief has just referenced, the challenge, particularly when we got the information about Maccabi, was that the worry was that the Maccabi fans would target the community. And we saw that in the information intelligence, that we had people purporting to be Maccabi fans online who were goading local community members and saying, this is what you're going to get. So this was all forming part of the heat of the situation. So based on that, the commanders tried to make the right decision. That was reasonable in the circumstances. You've got a very hot community reception. You've got Maccabi Tel Aviv and the Dutch police saying, we feel they actively targeted community members. Those two things together posed a sufficient risk. And the challenge around risk decision making is public safety has got to be at the heart of it. So again, I understand the frustration, but there is no conspiracy here. This was a decision based on safety.
So why are we only hearing about this now? Why is it that a report has come at lunchtime today from the Times newspaper that you had information on the 5th of September that there were likely to be vigilante groups within the West Midlands community itself who were planning to take action against the Maccabi fans? How is it that this committee is just hearing this for the first time?
Well, I think this is the first time specifically that you've asked for that detail. That's what we tried.
Outrageous.
That's what we tried to get across.
Absolutely outrageous.
This is the first time that you.
I think to be clear, we have wanted to get to the bottom of this and understand why the decision was taken that you did. We would like very much for you to be able to demonstrate to us that this was done entirely on a risk-based matter for public safety, etc., etc. And it is very frustrating if there is information that could help you in that doesn't come to light up front. And I don't think we should have to ask specifically for every single piece of information if you have things that you could give us that would assist us in this process.
So we do have things that we've documented in the form of the reports that you've asked for, which you've set out quite clearly. We've set out the process, and what I'm sure my colleague has been trying to say, and what I say to you very clearly is, we have individual intelligence reports from people who live locally, but also some open source intelligence reports. And as Chief Roberts has just explained as well, we have assessed those and we have used those. We've got details of all those that were in the minds of the commanders that were briefed in. And that type of detail includes detail about the hostility of certain aspects of the local community towards the group of RIS fans that were due to attend. It absolutely covers the things that were said online about agitation, and it also covers elements of information that we got about people wanting to protest both on a local basis but also outside of the West Midlands, coming to the West Midlands to protest. So all those pieces of information we have got. And that's what we've based our decision on. And
we need to move on because we've got more questions. But the important thing here actually is not whether this committee is satisfied. It's whether the Jewish community living in Birmingham feels safe and that the police of West Midlands Police are policing without fear or favour and protecting the Jewish community. That is what is absolutely of essence in these questions.
And that is absolutely what we have done from day one, and we continue to do, and we are absolutely 100% committed to do.
Good job, you can't see the shaking of heads behind you, Chief Constable.
Both in terms of this fixture itself and all the ongoing liaison that we've had and the service that we've provided to members of the Jewish community, particularly in light of things that have happened nationally and internationally over the last couple of months after this football match. We can absolutely assure you of that.
Can I move on to Paul Kohler?
Two quick questions. Was this information about potential vigilantes attacking Maccabi fans, was that raised in the SAGs, any of the SAGs? I can't see it in the minutes.
I don't know the answer to that question because I wasn't at the SAG.
So
we can ask the council, the City Council.
Okay. It does feel a bit like we're going to name Maccabi fans, but not anyone else.
It's not covered in the peer review, which totally analyses and highlights behaviour on behalf of presumed behaviour on behalf of Maccabi Tel Aviv, but it does never talk about the threat to the Jewish community or to Israeli players or Israeli fans if they came to Birmingham. There's never analysed.
It's an appendix to the review. It is in the review.
The other quick question I wanted to ask, Chief Constable Roberts, when did you become aware of the conversation that the Chief Inspector had with the Dutch police?
So we conducted the peer review. It was requested by Chief Constable Guildford and Gavin Stevens as MPCC lead. Clearly there was a lot of consternation. So
when did you become aware of that conversation?
Well, the review was on the 20th of October.
You didn't become aware before then?
We may have had a conversation about it, but not in any great detail.
You told us earlier that you heard him from, because you didn't forward Lord Mann's report, because it was contradicted by information you only heard from on the 20th of October. So why did you not forward Lord Mann's report? It can't be for information you hadn't yet heard.
I was aware that West Midlands Police had been in contact with the Dutch police because we brokered the contact via the UKPU. So we'd put them in contact. I had an overview that there had a conversation, that there had been concerns raised, and the brief had gone to West Midlands Police. So I'm aware that they'd had the direct contact with the Dutch police.
You told us that you didn't forward Lord Mann's report because it had been contradicted by what?
I said it had been superseded.
Superseded. Well, but you didn't even know its contents till the 20th of October.
I was aware that there had been a conversation.
Yes, and but you know what had happened in the conversation.
And it had been well publicised anyway. I think anyone with a passing interest knew that there had been issues in Amsterdam and that had been flagged up as an issue. I read the detail of the conversation between West Midlands Police and the Dutch police when we went and did the peer review. So there's a difference between having awareness. The detail in Lord Mann review, the relevant bit was a report from the Dutch police, the activities that went on and the criminal activity as summarised by Lord Mann. The Dutch police were in contact with West Midlands Police, so that's the direct intelligence to base a risk assessment on.
So you simply didn't forward Lord Mann's report because you knew there'd been a conversation between Chief Inspector and the Dutch police?
I clearly knew the content of Lord Mann's report, and I knew that the West Midlands Police have been in direct contact with the Dutch police.
And that was enough to supersede sending that information to, and you stand by that?
Yes.
I've got Robbie Moore, then Jenny Reid, then we move on to Joe White.
Yes, thank you. I think what we're all struggling to understand is the lack of continuity between what has been reported by the mayoralty in the Dutch authorities and what's then been reiterated to us through the correspondence you sent to us since the last committee. So the Dutch police are clearly saying in their evidence that's been provided on the Wednesday night before that effectively the instigators were threats of aggression and threats towards Israelis through social media postings. And that's quite clearly in the evidence that's been provided by the Dutch authorities. It says various social media posts, messages with aggression and threats were aimed at Maccabi supporters. It goes on to say that pro-Palestinian texts were sprayed, painted with graffiti onto the arena. It then goes on to say that there were slide projections aimed at the arena that were filming against anti-Israeli messaging. It then goes on to say that there were about 50 Maccabi supporters that were specifically targeted. But then none of that is referenced within any of the correspondence that has come back to this committee. In fact, it says the contrary, in that it was Israeli fans that were targeting effectively the Muslim community. So why is there such a contradictory of evidence that has been provided? That's what simply I cannot get my head around, because that's what, in essence, is incredibly worrying to the committee, that there's just everything is contradicting itself. Who are we to believe? It seems very much to me that it's almost like a retrofitting of the evidence to try and back up ultimately the decision that was concluded.
I can speak to the peer review, and the peer review clearly says there are conflicting reports surrounding this disorder. There were strong accusations of anti-Semitism, with attackers targeting the Maccabi supporters because they are Israeli/Jewish. Other reports state that the Maccabi supporters were ripping down Palestinian flags, etc. So certainly in the peer review, and that was information from West Midlands Police, we acknowledge there was hostile acts on both sides. And I think I'll go on to clarify, it is very difficult to actually give a definitive of who did what first.
Was that presented to the SAG? Was that it?
No, that was the peer review.
Peer review, but was it presented to the SAG? What the Dutch police said about the attacks on and the threats to Maccabi fans?
So no answer. The point being, it's very unclear to us that the evidence that's been presented by the Dutch authorities is very different to the analogy of events that took place, and dare I say, which side was against one another in the evidence that's been provided by West Midlands.
Can I just clarify, what evidence are you referring to?
Right, so
The Dutch police, have they provided that HASC? With
so the mayoralty within for the Dutch.
There are a number of reports that relate to Amsterdam. So you've got an inspectorate report, you've got the mayoral report. So there are a range of reports. I think
it's the report that came out, which was dated the 11th of November 2024. It recounts the troubles on the Amsterdam match. It goes through the course of the Wednesday evening and night and the police action that was taken.
This is a report that was commissioned by the mayor of Amsterdam.
Could I correct the record that was issued by the mayor, but is written on behalf of the Chief Constable and the Chief Crown Prosecutor. It was not written by the mayor. She issued it on their behalf.
Okay. So why are there different perspectives? I'd imagine because it was a 3-day, very complicated policing operation. All we can do is report on what the Dutch commanders briefed us personally on.
That's not all you can do. You can go look at the other bits of evidence.
Look at the published report.
I'm sorry, but you are capable of doing more than that.
No, you are right. You're absolutely right. I just think there's something around. We've had a personal one-to-one conversation with Dutch commanders who briefed us around the challenges they faced in policing 3 days of extreme violence across the city of Amsterdam. I acknowledge there are a range of perceptions and views and different reports that contribute to that. But our assessment was we've got growing community tension. We've got the arrival of Maccabi Tel Aviv, whose hooligan element within the Ultras we were concerned about, and those two things meant...
We were told the Ultras weren't coming. We were told last time...
We were never told that. Lord Mann said he believed that he was briefed by Maccabi Tel Aviv the Ultras were never coming. We were never briefed that the Ultras were not coming.
Was the question asked?
Chair, can I just... One of the difficulties in this, normally when we have any sort of fixture with European teams, the UKPU, which is the National Football Intelligence Point, forgive me if I'm telling you something you know, would liaise directly with their opposite numbers in the foreign country. Israel doesn't have an NFIP, so we attempted to broker that contact via the Foreign Office on 2 occasions and weren't able to do so.
We've seen that in the peer review, how disappointing it is that there wasn't that.
Yeah, it's a missed opportunity. Equally, UEFA have a conference at the start of the football season where they invite participants, clubs and police. And again, Maccabi turned up to that conference, so there was able to be a conversation between them, Aston Villa and West Midlands Police. The Israeli police, again, didn't turn up. And normally you would have a pre-visit to an away game where the police would visit with the club and assess the security positions. The fact that there was no direct contact with the Israeli police made that more challenging, because we can't always, and this isn't specific to Israeli teams, we've had problems with people from different countries. We can't always rely on what a club tells us. And there are plenty of examples, and West Midlands can probably speak to one challenging European fixture they had with the Age of Warsaw,
yes.
Where what was told by a club actually didn't materialise. So, of course, you should try and triangulate with every possible source, but our normal avenue of going police to police wasn't available in this circumstance, which made it harder to make firm decisions based on the information supplied.
I suppose where we are confused is that that's the case when the away fans come and, okay, you've not been able to get the full picture, but the away fans are still coming, and afterwards you regret actually that there could have been different things done, and with hindsight things could have been different. In this case, the away fans were banned. That is a different situation, and the thing that is puzzling us is why there weren't extra steps taken to confirm why, in this case, the extraordinary and very out of the ordinary decision to ban the away fans was taken without picking up the phone to Israeli police. And maybe you tried, and we've not had that information. Perhaps you did try, without having those conversations with Maccabi Tel Aviv. If you did it with others and allowed the fans to come, and you didn't take that risk-based approach, which you tell us is what you're doing, it's always risk-based, it's all about public safety, then why on the earth, when you get information that you don't trust, do you just not ban every away fan?
Well, we'd never do that. And I'm just trying to pick up on some of the questions that you asked as well. What troubles me as Chief is similar to what you've said, which is we have a conversation with three commanders, the three people that were involved from the Dutch side. And that information was clearly very concerning to us. That information was first-hand, from the horse's mouth, from a fellow professional. And that information itself, at the time it was given, we were not, there was not a commentary to the contrary by those people. I don't know why they've made the comments that they've said. I'm not sitting here and saying, oh, some of my colleagues in Holland are lying or anything like that. All I'm saying is we were provided with that information, and we've assessed that information, we've documented it. I've seen the notes that were made in the email, and it was really quite important information which clearly had an impact on the commanders and their assessment of the overall risk.
So why is that so different to the commentary that's been provided in the report from the Dutch?
I honestly do not know why. I can only tell you what we've been told by our fellow professionals. That is the straightforward answer to a straightforward question.
In terms of some signalling, and I appreciate your
Can I just before, when we have that level of uncertainty, then compounded with the information that we've received. I haven't finished yet, sorry. The information that's been reported in the Times newspaper today, where there was an acknowledgement that a report stated that in essence there is no preferable option, but it said that there was a local community planning to arm itself, and then the decision was taken effectively to stop the fans from coming. It all seems to create a narrative, from my perspective, that actually the intention was for no fans to be permitted, and that West Midlands Police were not going to do their best to enable those fan base to come and watch the match regardless. It all seems very one-sided from my point of view. So we're giving you the opportunity to counteract that narrative. It's for you to justify to us, not for us to be pulling teeth and getting the information out of you.
And hopefully, well, we obviously need to try a little bit harder in terms of setting that out for you. We have an abundance of that information and that intelligence which was building up, which we've got, which we've spoken about, some of the sources of that intelligence, that what's just been referenced, some community intelligence, intelligence from other agencies, intelligence that we've received as we were planning the event. And to really answer your question about, you know, making things fit, our starting point was they were all coming. That was the starting point. And they were all coming whilst all this intelligence was building up at the same time. The game was assessed as a high risk game. And when it comes to public safety, we were still planning on them attending, and we were thinking about measures actively, the commanders were. I've seen that in the notes about what mitigation measures could be selected to try and get the game going as safely as possible with away fans. After the Dutch information was received, though, that certainly was something which was so serious to the commanders that the decision was then taken to offer that advice to the Safety Advisory Group. But in terms of the specifics of what you said, and again what one of your colleagues has said just really beforehand, is that there were lots of pieces of that intelligence from a variety of sources around the risk profile of the fixture. And we absolutely, you know, to answer your question, we absolutely were planning up until that point on both sets of fans attending. We absolutely were.
We're going to move on from the intelligence at the moment, but let's be absolutely clear. What you're saying is that you wanted the fans to come, you were trying to find a way for the fans to come. This one phone call and the Google search were the things that confirmed to you that this was now no longer viable.
There's nothing to do with the Google search. That's completely irrelevant.
Chair, can I, just in terms of, I've got to say, it's really unusual in all the big matches I've seen, I'm talking Champions League finals and things like that, for a gold, silver and bronze commander from a foreign force to come on a meeting. The Amsterdam police, I've seen them firsthand deal with an awful lot of football violence. The Ajax risk group, one of the worst I've ever seen, come to the UK. For them to be bothered, there's an issue, because they can deal with serious football violence.
Did they proactively reach out to West Midland Police and say, we want to talk to you about this? Or
we were aware, and it comes back to the point that there have been issues with Maccabi via the UKFPU, which is why we brokered the contact, because they had the most recent experience.
So the contact started from the UK side?
I can't remember whether West Midlands asked UKFPU or UKFPU proactively did it. But the way it works is we will broker the contact with our opposite numbers in the Netherlands. The Netherlands are very good to work with. They, via their NFIP, will get in touch with the match commanders. The meeting was then arranged for West Midlands to speak firsthand. But as I say, for a city in a country that are very used to dealing with big events, for a gold, silver and bronze commander to turn up to speak to their English counterparts, there was clearly a pretty significant level of concern.
Not by Zoom. Joni Reid and Peter Prinsley, and then we must move on to other matters. Joni.
So what I'm getting from this so far is that there's a range of different intelligence information sources. But correct me if I'm wrong, it feels that what you have done in that process is suppressed information that isn't consistent with the decision that you've made in intelligence, and released and published information which supports the decision to ban the away fans. That's based primarily on the fact that you reiterate the importance of this telephone conversation with the Dutch police, that you didn't circulate John Mann's report or take it seriously, including the evidence from the Ministry of Justice and the National Security Services in the Netherlands. And when our colleagues contacted the Dutch police, they have refuted the claims that are included in the phone call that you made. They have publicly written and published, and I can read it to you now if you want, saying that it's an inaccurate account. It's not great, is it?
Well, there's some directs at West Midlands. Can I just deal with the Lord Mann report? There is nothing in the Lord Mann report that would have affected the decision.
Yeah, I'm saying that decision, that circulating that information didn't happen, but you did decide to release publicly the decision and the conversation that you had with the Dutch police, the private conversation which wasn't minuted, but you have suppressed the report that's in the Times today. You didn't send that to us, nor did you release it to the press or the media. or anything that contradicts your decision that you've made. So that's what it looks like from...
And I'm Peter Prinsley, so we can move on. Peter, if you can make your point.
If I can just quickly make my point. Look, central to this discussion that we're having is the question of whether there was political pressure put onto the Safety Advisory Group of the Birmingham City Council, who then made a decision and asked the police to justify this. What people are wondering is, was information then created by the police to support a decision that the Safety Advisory Group made as a result of political pressure that was coming from citizens of Birmingham and from a particular Birmingham MP? And I think that's the thing that we're all wondering. And I'm not sure that the last hour or so has thrown any light on that absolutely central question. Was there political interference in this decision to ban the Maccabi fans?
Well, I think you suggested at the last meeting, Chief Constable, that there might be political pressure being put on the Dutch police. So if there can be political pressure put on the Dutch police, it does feel slightly contradictory if it's not put onto our police.
Two things briefly. After today, because we've done the same for HMIC, we'll go through all the intelligence that we've got and we'll try and do a sanitised précis of every piece of intelligence to give to you, so you can see what we had, what we were working on, right? Number one. Number two, I think that is a really important question. It's a really important democratic question. And last time I answered that and I gave a very similar answer. From everything that I've read and the commanders that I spoke to, I do not believe that there was political influence on that decision. I don't believe that to be the case. I believe the information that we provided and the advice provided to the SAG and the decision making by the SAG and all those round the table in the SAG, and please ask this of people that come in after us.
We will.
And please get the audio of the SAG. I am sure that the SAG chair took into account what people thought. My personal opinion is there wasn't any political interference. I think there would have...
You did meet the MP.
Sorry, did I?
West Midlands Police did meet the local MP.
Yeah.
At their request.
They did, and that was the local MP for the area. Yeah, absolutely. We discussed that last time.
That by its very nature is political pressure.
I'm sure, you know, opinion formers of all sides wanted to do their influencing. But from my perspective as chief, I think your question is absolutely spot on. And my honest personal opinion is that the decision wasn't influenced by politics. Lots of local politicians and local members of the community, I'm sure, wanted to try and influence it, but I honestly don't think it was influenced.
Can we move on to some specific questions about the peer review and Joe White?
Yeah. So your peer review, Mr. Roberts, you confirmed that the meeting with the Dutch police was a tipping point for the West Midlands Police's approach to the fixtures. Do you think a single verbal intelligence briefing was sufficient to support this fundamental change in approach? And we've already covered this, but do you think there should be more of a more in-depth investigation, particularly as we all know, a number of reports have come out since the match in 2024, including I've seen reports from the Chief Constable, Dutch Police Constable, actually speaking on the radio, on the TV, regarding her personal perspective of what happened. So, which is very different to the reports, the report that was given to the West Midlands Police.
So, you always want more intelligence, but the peer review was based at the time when the decision had been made by the SAG, and the ask from Craig was that initial decision a reasonable one? And secondly, what were the options then? So the report was in two halves. Based on the intelligence and the threat posed by the Dutch report as provided to the peer review, I formed the view that it was a reasonable decision to seek the banning of away fans in the circumstances, the distinction being the potential threat by the visiting fans to the local community and the reaction that could provoke. So in terms of was it a reasonable response on the span of reasonableness, yes, I think that was a reasonable response. Information from police colleagues, even if it's only one incident report, is something that we'd always place high value on.
So I know you'll be aware that we're visiting Manchester City in a few weeks' time, and I understand that you're a season ticket holder.
Good intelligence.
Yeah. And we're playing Galatasaray, Manchester City.
Right.
Yes. So there were 2 murders in
Leeds.
Leeds, yes, and obviously that's a team that hasn't been allowed to come to the UK on countless times since that occasion. So what security assessments would you give to that team coming to the UK?
Well, that security assessment is going to be done. We will provide intelligence as best we can, working with the Turkish authorities, and that'll be up for JMP to do the threat assessment. Times change, the behaviour of fans changes. With the background, I think going to Istanbul is a different risk to Galatasaray coming to this country. We still have issues with the way English fans are treated in Istanbul. There are very draconian measures put in place for English fans, and we work hard to try and make sure that the fans are treated appropriately. So there's not a direct read across. Certainly anyone going to Galatasaray would always be a concern to us. Coming to the UK, I'm really confident that GMP will manage it well.
Mm-hmm. So at the end of your peer review assessment, you actually said you believe that the preferred option would have been to bus fans into Aston Villa.
So the peer review, as I say, was in 2 halves.
Yeah.
The ask from Craig was the original decision a reasonable one?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can take a view whether it's right, wrong or indifferent. It was a reasonable option. In terms of the prospective view then, the ask was what are the reasonable options going forward? And I gave 4 options. One was ban all the way for all fans. It was deemed that would be unfair on the Aston Villa fans who hadn't caused issues, and you could then provoke a response from them, so it might increase the threat. The second one was allow everyone to come as per full allocations. That seemed to exacerbate the threat. The 2 possible options were subject to discussions with the government, which Craig can speak to, was maintain the ban on away fans. The other option, which then became the preferred option, was to have a limited number of Maccabi fans. The rationale for why that was then a better option, and it was looking forward, not back, was that if it was a limited number of Maccabi fans, they would be easier to protect. Maccabi as a club could be put on the onus to make sure that the fans who came were the genuine fans, and they vetted out any of the fanatics or people who might cause trouble. That then leads into a communication strategy to hopefully calm any potential against those fans by saying, look, these are just normal fans coming to enjoy the game, and you can try and mitigate the risk that way. And it's easier to manage 100, 200 people maybe into the ground than a number. The risk went up after the initial decision by the SAG. Because of the publicity, it became more heated. People on different views expressed views. In some ways, the threat became greater. So it may have mitigated the threat to allow a limited number of Maccabi fans to come to remove some of the noise around it.
Mm-hmm. And do you think, and it was pursued with the match that went ahead a few weeks later, where the match was scheduled at an earlier time in order to manage the bussing in and bussing out. Wasn't considered as part of your peer review as an alternative.
Well, I think once we'd established what the overall structure was about fans, no fans, then you'd kick into what are the other mitigation measures.
Right.
So, for example, it may have been a reduced allocation of Maccabi fans, could have been taken to a remote location, bussed in. It could have been they came in smaller groups in less obvious transport to avoid a big escort and a big drama. It could have been that there was restrictions on drinking. That would have then fallen after that as to the detail of a tactical plan to try and make it happen as safely as possible.
We've already covered the fact that there was no communication with Israeli police. Do you think more action should have been taken in order to try to make that actually effectively happen, perhaps a Europol or
A Europol wouldn't really become involved in this. There's a danger in going through an outside existing networks, because it's very well established, the football policing network of NFIPs, where we exchange the information. If we can't make direct contact because Israel's got no NFIP, our route is then by the Foreign Office, which we then tried. So there was 2 distinct attempts to do it. There was the missed opportunity in Budapest at the conference. So with hindsight, could we have tried even more? Yeah, I think we would, but I think we made reasonable attempts to try and engage with the Israeli police and authorities, and unfortunately we couldn't broker that contact.
We need to move on to community engagement, so I'm going to bring in Joni Reid.
Thank you. You'll know how what a difficult time this is for the Jewish community in light of the huge surge in anti-Semitic hate incidences and, of course, the murders in Manchester. And since this decision was taken, we've had the horrific event on Bondi Beach. Based on that, was that not at the forefront of your mind at any point when you were making these decisions? And did you at any point not think it was a good idea to seek more advice, support and recommendations from the Jewish community? Did they feature in your thinking?
I can come in there if that's okay. So I think we've learned a lot as a force in relation to our engagement with the Jewish community. I think if there is a silver lining in this whole situation, it's the fact that we are working, I think, closer and more strategically with the local Jewish community in the West Midlands. If I talk specifically around the engagement for this particular fixture, subsequent to the announcement at the end of August, from the 3rd of September onwards, West Midlands Police engaged very closely with our local community security representative, security trust representative, our CST rep, and that's sort of a tried and tested approach, but I think our learning is that we missed a real opportunity to get closer to our Jewish community sooner in relation to this fixture. I think our liaison with our CST rep has been very, very strong, and we were meeting with him weekly, probably more so actually, and there was a lot of information exchange, and I know that the CST have an advisory role. At the point where we liaised with our main community contact from the Jewish community, we were moving into High Holy Days, and there was some limitations in relation to contact, but fundamentally we'd arranged to meet with the chair of the Birmingham West Midlands Jewish Representative Council on the 17th of October, face-to-face with CST, etc. I think...
after the decision?
Yeah, it was after the decision. However, the second SAG was scheduled for the 20th of October, and it was brought forward on the 15th. So I think there are a number of things there. I think our face-to-face meetings with Jewish community reps in Birmingham weren't soon enough. 100% agree with you. I think within the letter from the Chief Constable to the Chair of HASC, we've highlighted, I think, an improved engagement position with the Jewish community in the West Midlands. And I feel we have developed and continue to develop stronger and more collaborative working arrangements. I think learning-wise, I think CST liaison is our go-to, and I think police forces do that nationally, and I think it's insufficient for events of this magnitude, and I think our learning is we should have liaised earlier with our key representatives. I do think, however, it was rather unhelpful that the SAG was brought forward, I think. So the SAG was due for the 20th, and the two key community meetings, one with the Jewish community, one with the Muslim community, interestingly, were both took place on the 16th and 17th, both after the decision.
Thank you. Just as a kind of side note, and the West Midlands Police is by no means the only perpetrator of such an approach or a crime, as I would not very appropriately say, but you know, I find it hard to believe that this approach would have been taken had it been any other minority group, and I think it's really important that all public bodies and institutions reflect on that. It would be unlikely to have happened with anyone else. Why did you decide to consult with, I think it was 4 or 5 mosques and institutions in the area, or organisations in the area that have well documented whether it's in the press media or indeed crime incidences of anti-Semitism and extremism prior to the decision to ban the Maccabi fans?
So my understanding is from liaison with the community bronze commander that we didn't. So the liaison with the Muslim community, the large community meeting with the Muslim community, took place on the 16th, which was subsequent to the second SAG, which was brought forward from the 20th.
So it's incorrect to say then that you consulted and met with various mosques, including ones with a history of anti-Semitism and extremism. That's not the case.
So I think there's a difference between consultation and engagement, firstly.
Okay.
So
did you consult with them? So you didn't meet with them, but you did consult with them?
No, we engaged with all of our communities.
What does engage? Sorry, I want to be really clear about this. So you didn't meet them?
Yes, we did.
You did, but after the decision was made?
On the 16th, correct.
On the 16th. But prior to the decision that was made, who did you meet with? That you understood or you now understand to be extremists or anti-Semites?
So the engagement plan around this related to reassurance and communication. So there's a difference between consultation and engagement. So we weren't consulting with the community, we were engaging with the community to get community sentiment, viewpoints, understand tone, understand tension, and to reassure that we were going to do everything we can to protect all communities around this fixture. So the engagement starts at local neighbourhood level. So from the 3rd of September, when we identified our community bronze commander, through to beyond the fixture, our neighbourhood teams have been liaising with people within the vicinity. So, for example, we had, through our interfaith forum, we had the Church of England church in Aston make contact with us because they were worried about protests. Okay. So the neighbourhood teams liaised with them in relation to reassurance and to understand their fears. So that work took place from the outset, from the 3rd of September all the way through to prior to the fixture. The formal community bronze meeting, for want of a better phrase, that took place with the Muslim community and the Jewish community took place on the 16th, and then for the Muslim community and actually those in the broader community, it wasn't just a Muslim and Islamic meeting per se. And then the meeting with our chair and the CST rep from the Jewish community took place on the 17th, which was then followed up on the 20th.
Okay. So in terms of community relations and political influence, you didn't have any bilateral communication with anyone in the community with a history of anti-Semitism and extremist beliefs, as far as you're aware?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. On looking at the SAG as a kind of a committee, a body that takes decisions, at any point did you notice or raise the fact that there were two councillors on that decision-making body who had a history of extremist and anti-Semitic views? Did that kind of cross your path, your radar at any point?
So I don't think I was aware, but clearly I wasn't in command at the time. I do think that's probably a conversation for the SAG chair in relation to how they manage their attendees. It's
definitely a decision, a conversation to have with them. But in terms of making decisions about safety, which I think is very much in your line of business, having a kind of approach, or at least an understanding of who's making these big decisions about the safety of our community and where their ideology or indeed their pre-kind of decision approach is. You didn't think about that, discuss that. You weren't concerned about who was on the SAG and the decisions and the information that they were bringing and influencing in the decision about safety?
I don't think we were concerned, no.
No. Okay.
Independent SAG chair, professional, experienced, and lots of different of our local partners represented at the SAG table. So no is the answer to your question. And I am told not so many years ago, I think the local MP chaired the SAG as well. So how it all comes about on who sits on the SAG is definitely an issue for the local authority.
You're not concerned about it from a safety perspective?
Honestly, we didn't have any concerns about that. It was never mentioned to us.
Can I just say a broader point in terms of safety advisory groups? First thing I'd say is, notwithstanding any issues in this, they were brought in post a number of disasters. The genesis of it was around the Ibrox disaster, and obviously we've had Heysel, Hillsborough, the Bradford fire. So there's a bit of an overlapping of different attempts that have improved it. But the bottom line on the current process is this is the longest ever period in British football without a disaster where people have gone to a football match and died. So if there are tweaks required to the system, we need to be careful because it's been very successful at keeping people safe. It is clearly locally focused, and on the base level, the aim of the SAG is to let people go to a game and do it in safety. So I think whatever thoughts come out of this, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, because we've been very successful at keeping people safe. I think there's probably a broader thing about consistency of SAGs, which you allude to. There is no consistent mandate for who goes apart from emergency services. SAG chairs have varying degrees of training, background and relevance for this. So there is a very diverse picture across the country about the efficacy of SAGs. That said, the process has worked very well at keeping people safe. The final point to make, obviously there's been national government commentary on this. I do think some thought needs to be given about how we give those broader concerns a voice at a SAG in an audited way. Because ultimately the SAG and the Chief Constable, if this had gone badly wrong in terms of public safety and people have been injured or hurt or died, then they're the people who are going to be held to account. So I think we need to look at a way of updating the system for consistency, but also to give appropriate people the voice. Bearing in mind we've got Euro 28 coming up, where there'll be a lot of commentary. So it needs to be fed in a proper, documented, audited way that I think from the conversation we're having you'd probably agree with.
So, we obviously, Baroness Casey did her report following
Yes.
the incidents at Wembley, and our sister committee, the DCMS committee, is looking at safety advisory groups now as well. But we as a committee will absolutely, this is part of what we're looking at. Joe White wants to come in quickly, and then I'm going to Robin Moore.
We're going off in diverting actually, but this is about the way that way that football is managed, because it's responsible for DCMS, responsible for the Home Office, and now you're talking about the FCO. Now,
sorry, the FCDO are purely a conduit for us to get information.
Okay, but in my view, and it may be well become a recommendation that comes out of this our report, is how these issues are managed, because we're getting, the security and safety of sites of football grounds muddled up with fans and who attends, etc. And I think that there should be very entirely different decision making processes.
It's probably a more in-depth conversation. The remit is safety. A subset of that is security. It's only relatively recently, that the Green Guide's been updated to specifically reference the need to consider crime and disorder and counter-terrorism as a subset of safety. So it's not perfect, but it's a really good system that's kept people safe. So I just think we need a considered approach to make sure it's absolutely even better.
I'm conscious of time. Are you okay for another 5 or 10 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, we've also made recommendations because the HMIC are doing a thematic around SAGs as well. And we've made recommendations based on our learning from this experience into that. So I'm sure that will help contribute, but I absolutely echo those comments.
I'm glad that you agree that you need to improve your processes in terms of engaging with the Jewish community and how that affects the decisions that are made. I just point out that at the previous Home Affairs Select Committee we were told that the Jewish community supported the ban, and that, along with very many other things that I was going to go through but I won't because of time, contradicts what you previously said. So the Jewish community didn't support the ban because you hadn't sufficiently engaged with them. But anyway, I'll leave it there.
Do you want to comment?
I was just going to say, thank you, Chair. So it was never my intention to misrepresent the views of the Jewish community. I was personally quite gutted to leave the first session, to be contacted by the Chair and to understand that I had caused confusion or consternation. That was never my intention. I immediately apologised, which was then shared with the community. I will do whatever I can with our local commanders to continue to improve our working relationship with the Jewish community.
And Mrs. Jacobs is someone that we regularly liaise with, and we are very grateful for the support that she's given us, and I know she's grateful for the support we've given her post some of those international events, and that's what I was saying before, we absolutely continue to do so.
I don't know who Mrs. Jacobs is.
Probably more.
Just following on with community engagement, did you engage with mosques or Muslim representatives in advance of making a decision?
In advance of making the decision, I think we liaised with a range of faiths, community groups and mosques, yes.
Including mosques. On what dates did you meet with mosques or Muslim representatives?
I've got a full list of community contacts. I can send that to you if you wish, in relation to every single date and time of every communication that took place.
That'd be great. It is my understanding that West Midlands Police decided to consult with various mosques, as you've indicated,
Engage, not consult, but yeah.
Okay, including ones that had a previous documented history of anti-Semitism prior to the decision being made with Maccabi fans. Are you aware that those mosques had that?
Not as far as I'm aware, no.
No. And is it reasonable to check that those mosques would have had that level of accusation that had been made against them before engaging with them?
What we have is a vicinity or a community that has places of worship, charities, third sector organisations and key contacts, and we liaised with a lot of different people who I'm sure have a range of views, but it wasn't consultation, it was engagement, and there was no pressure in relation to our decision. It was made in relation to public safety.
Just finally, why was the threat level to local Jewish communities downgraded from medium initially and then didn't feature in the West Midlands Police final report, the reference to being downgraded to medium?
So I think that was in relation to the third SAG and the information provided by the Silver Commander. I'm not aware of why it was removed. My understanding is we were focusing in relation to the attendees, the protest groups, etc.
Okay. It was downgraded, but then not necessarily included within the final report or reason.
That was more of an oversight than anything else.
Can I jump in there? Why was the threat to Maccabi fans was high on the 7th of October? We have all this evidence of armed vigilantes or the threat of that. Why was their threat to them downgraded to medium by the 24th of October? What happened to downgrade the threat to them?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. The reason it was high was because of the information intelligence that we had within the operation to suggest that there was a threat that could be posed towards the Maccabi fans when they arrived. By the time of the final SAG, Maccabi Tel Aviv had said they'd refused all away tickets, so we were expecting no away fans, so therefore the risk level had reduced.
So it was because they were not coming,
correct,
there was a medium threat to them still?
Correct.
Why was there no threat or low threat?
Because there was potentially an opportunity for people to still attend.
Why was the threat to the Muslim community raised from low to high?
From low to high?
Yeah, between the 7th of October and the 24th.
I would imagine in relation to the information intelligence that was presented to the Silver Commander at the time.
But the Maccabi fans weren't coming, so it was not from the Maccabi fans, presumably.
I would assume not, but again,
So I think post the decision being communicated, we had an uptick in right-wing protest. So we started to receive more...
So it became a higher risk because of the decision to ban the fans?
Yes. So we started to get more intelligence coming in of counter-protest, which would have been obviously directed towards our pro-Palestinian protests. So not a threat from Maccabi fans, but additional protesters coming into Birmingham to sort of counter-protest around the pro-Palestinian protests.
Robbie?
So just moving on to engagement with the Home Secretary, what was the response, and this is addressed to the Chief Constable, if I may, what was the response of the Home Secretary after you indicated to her on the 8th of October that the no away fans was the working assumption of the SAG?
Yeah, subject to the SAG's decision.
Yeah.
The Home Secretary's response was that she noted that. She didn't give a specific response. Once
no
I'd given
levels
the
of
information,
concern were raised by the Home Secretary, just that it was noted?
Yeah, it was at the end of a meeting which was all to do with protest, which the Metropolitan Chiefs were on and I sat on, and the Chief HMI sat on as well. So it wasn't a long conversation back from the Home Secretary. It was a meeting around protest, and she noted what I said to her.
Okay, so that was noted in the meeting or in the engagement that you had with her on the 8th of October. The decision was made on the 16th of October, so a period of time between those two dates. Was there any further communication from the Home Secretary or number 10, the Prime Minister's office, in relation to any concerns being raised around the fact that there may not be any fans permitted to attend on the basis of the SAG?
No, there was no further correspondence. I've hopefully supplied you with details of the correspondence that was relevant, because I think in Chief Constable Roberts' submission there was a couple of emails, and I think we've done the same as well.
Despite the narrative that's come out from the government, there was no concerns that were raised to West Midlands Police in that period of time, even though we've heard in the evidence session now that there was counter-protests from the far right as a result of a ban being put in place.
Yeah, there was nothing direct to ourselves, no.
And what representations were made to you by Birmingham City Council leaders about the implications of a decision to ban fans from attending?
Well, there was only one leader who is going to give evidence after ourselves, Mr Cotton, and out of courtesy I updated him that the position from our side in terms of advice to the SAG that there would be no away fans. He disagreed. He disagreed with the outcome of that, but didn't stray into the operational police decision making. And I'm sure you can ask him those questions. And the reason that I communicated with him is because we do communicate on various issues. He's a key local partner. I very much respect his view, but I also very much respect the decision making of colleagues of mine in terms of weighing that risk up to public safety. And I'm sure he, as a professional, respected the decision making of the SAG, the independent chair of the SAG that's a council employee, and the way that the SAG is managed. But that was the communication that I had.
And given the level of public interest in this, the fact that this is your second time in front of the committee, did you anticipate any of the fallout that would then come from the decision that had been made by the SAG? And as part of that process with your discussions with the Home Office, did you seek any additional resource or any additional strategy that could deal with an inevitable outcome of allowing fans or a limited number of fans to still attend, with being able to mitigate any
The peer review conclusion was the preferred option was to accept a small number of away fans?
Yes, absolutely. But as Chief Constable Roberts set out, the first part of what I asked him to do was give me an independent assessment as to the reasonableness of the decisions that were made that led to the ban on the away fans as to that point in time now. The second part of what I asked was, what are the options from your independent perspective going forward now at this moment in time? So after the ban was announced, there was lots of, on that particular weekend, so the Prime Minister made comment, I think on the Thursday evening, then there was commentary on Friday, then an increase in the intelligence we got about protest, counter-protest, and I think the Tommy Robinson picture of the shirt, etc., and his potential attendance. On that weekend itself, I had conversations with Home Office officials with regards to, they asked ourselves to look at what are the options going forward. And as I'd asked Mark, the level of risk had increased because of all that additional protest, intelligence, and who was likely to come, etc. And at that point, over the weekend, I had a conversation with Home Office officials, as they previously said in their evidence, with regards to what additional resource would be required to try and facilitate a number of Maccabi fans to attend the fixture with the intention of a new look at the risks as they posed themselves on the Monday morning when Mark undertook the peer review. So it was based upon what had happened on the weekend, so what had changed since the announcement, what had happened with the intelligence that we received over the weekend, a new look at the risk level and what could we reasonably do. And those are the options that Mark set out.
Did you at any point, as the Chief Constable, request additional resource to deal with the initial recommendation of allowing a limited number of fans being able to attend?
No, to be clear, up until the point of the fans being banned from attending, I didn't request any additional resource from the Home Office, because that was within our gift to go to mutual aid and just sort out. But after that weekend, when I did speak to the Home Office, obviously the risk had gone, as Mark says in his peer review.
Just before the risk level changed,
Yeah.
so even though you had at your disposal to go to mutual aid, was that a consideration that you gave?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, we were going to mutual aid.
And is that documented anywhere for us to be able to see that that was a
within-
consideration
yeah,
that
it's
you
within the
actively
paper.
gave?
The reviewer referenced that there
Early
had been an
doors.
assessment of the number of PSUs that were required, which was above West Midlands' capability, so they were, it is one of the big forces of the country, but they would see mutual aid.
Was the 5,000 number?
No, I think that was the Dutch figure that was referenced to. The reference here is that West Midlands had said, on any of the circumstances, they'd have to go to mutual aid to get sufficient officers for the operation.
So yes, early doors is the answer to the question. But obviously we need more after a reassessment if we were to reconsider then a limited number of fans attending.
Can you read?
My very final question. So overall then we have minutes that highlights that the decision was made in the absence of intelligence, that there is varying views, stats on what happened in Amsterdam, but the Dutch police have written to say that they don't recognise your version of the conversation. You told the Home Affairs Select Committee last time that that the Jewish community supported your decision, that 5,000, which wasn't true, 5,000 police had been deployed in Amsterdam, despite your own figures and the Dutch saying that it was 1,200, and that as local Israeli fans had thrown locals into a river. And that you had not been subject to any political pressure, and it's now emerged that you met both the MP and other local activists. So my very quick question is, would you make the same decision again?
Certainly, we're not an organisation that doesn't learn from things, and we treat each event on its own merits. And some of those things that you said, absolutely, in the cold light of day, looking in, do I regret the fact that that minute seems to have been recorded about a lack of intelligence? Because there wasn't a lack of intelligence. There was an abundance of intelligence. And I think that's unhelpful. I think that's misleading. And on behalf of the organisation, to the public, I apologise unreservedly about those types of matters. The 5,000 was our professional opinion. The issue with regards to the intelligence that came from the Dutch, we absolutely took it on face value. The communication and the detail that was written was compelling. I can't speak for the Dutch. That would be wrong of me to do so. So on that side of things, do I think that the decision was reasonable in the circumstances? Yes. Could it have been a different decision, or would it be a different decision going forward? Possibly it could have been. But all these decisions depend on the facts and the intelligence that the commanders weigh up over a period of time. But those things that you've highlighted, as I've said quite clearly, those leave questions for me in some of that detail, particularly about the absence of the intelligence. And Mike corrected the record very quickly in terms of what was said to make it clear that we didn't mislead anybody. And we are very sorry if we gave any of that impression. And I'm also very much sorry, and I do regret the focus that this has placed on our local Jewish community in light of all the other events that have happened nationally and globally. And that's why we have absolutely redoubled our efforts to make sure that as soon as any of those events occurred, we are absolutely behind the community, and we are working with them closely and continue to do so. So each one on its own merits.
Can I just make a point about the police numbers? Just from the update from the Mayor, and appreciate some confusion about this. But one of the reports from the Mayor says that there was more than 1,200 officers to keep any risks under control, including specialist units such as mobile, arrest, horse, reconnaissance. From midnight onwards, there was at least 500 officers on duty. This does not include the large number of police officers who worked overtime during the night. Their registration, etc., will take a while to come through. So there is some variation on the numbers.
5,000, that was it.
Well, no, but that's
Very,
but that's specifically what was said in
very
terms
final
of
question,
Very
Joe
fine. So,
White.
so very quickly, Mr Wilkinson, you attended the SAG meetings, and obviously there's no minutes of what you said at the SAG meetings. Can you report to this meeting what you said you advised the SAG committee meetings?
So the first SAG, the representation and the information and intelligence that was shared there was from the Silver Commander, who highlighted the numbers of layers of intelligence and information that we had, both local community tensions, protest, football, and obviously some additional sensitive intelligence. That was shared within the first SAG. At the second SAG, I reiterated that obviously in the absence of Maccabi fans, the threat to the football fixture would come down, absolutely, because some of those potential clashes between football supporters came down, but the threat to the event still remained high because of protest, counter-protest, and some of those ongoing community tensions within it. So there was still a high threat to the whole event, not just the football.
And what was your recommendation at the first SAG committee?
So I didn't make any recommendation at the first SAG, but the first SAG recommendation was a preference of no away fans. But what I think is important is we obviously were part of a number of emergency services partners who all were given the opportunity to put forward a view as to their preference for that fixture. The Silver Commander at the first SAG made the recommendation, or the preference would be for no away fans based on all of that information, the intelligence, and the significant threat that the whole event posed to all people.
To remind us, you were at that first SAG. Did you or the Silver Commander tell them about your conversation with the Dutch police?
So the information would have been available to the Silver Commander because I briefed him the
You
night
were
before.
there, did he?
So my
Did he?
my recollection is all of the information that we had was shared at that point and briefed into the SAG.
He did tell them about your conversation.
He would have shared
You
all
were
of the
there. You were
information.
there. You must know.
You'll have to forgive me. I mean, I haven't heard the minutes, heard the recording from the SAG.
Do you
So it'd be
recall? What do you recall?
So I recall a very detailed, comprehensive briefing from the Silver Commander who outlined all of the threats and risks that the fixture was presenting.
Both sides, including Maccabi
on all sides.
Tel Aviv fans, and also the threats
All sides.
from to harm Israeli fans.
Chief Constable, you look like you wanted to say one word.
I'll send I found the taxi thing that we referred to very early on. I'll send that through to you as well,
Appreciate that.
which shows the both.
I appreciate that we have, you've indulged us and stayed longer than you were supposed to, so I do appreciate you giving us extra time. We as a committee are now going to talk to the City Council and other bodies, but we will reflect on everything we've heard, and we will be producing a report on this issue. But thank you again for your time. I'm going to have a short break now. Order. Order, order. We now come to our second panel of witnesses on the issues regarding the decision to ban away fans for the Aston Villa Maccabi Tel Aviv Europa game. Can I ask our second panel to introduce themselves? Perhaps I'll start with you, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. I'm Richard Brooks. I'm an officer of Birmingham City Council. I'm the Executive Director for City Operations. So that covers a portfolio of the core environmental services of the Council, the waste collection and disposal, highways, regulation and enforcement. And for the purposes of this committee, it's also the resilience function, which is where the safety advisory group is housed. And in the regulation and enforcement function, the environmental health function, which is where the licensing of the ground is done.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm Councillor John Cotton. I'm the leader of Birmingham City Council.
I'm Anthony Cox. I'm the City Solicitor with Birmingham City Council, responsible for legal, democratic services and electoral services, which also encompasses governance.
Thank you, and I apologise for keeping you waiting, and I'm very grateful that you've said you can stay behind a little later. But I'm going to start questions with Joe White.
Yes, thank you for coming. First of all, can I ask, were you in the audience for the previous questioning?
Yes.
Great. So my first question is the quality of the minute taking and the fact that we weren't able to gain a full picture from exactly what happened in each of the meetings. Can you answer that, please?
Richard, could I ask you to pick up as Director of Operations on that?
Yes, of course. So first of all, I'm sorry if the minutes have not allowed you to get a full enough picture of the events in the meetings. There were 4 Safety Advisory Group meetings: the 7th of October, the 16th of October, the 24th of October, and the 3rd of November. We provided minutes for each of those, and we have provided you with the full minutes in both unredacted and redacted form. In terms of the quality of the minutes, they are circulated after the meetings. The meetings from the 7th of October were actually circulated on the same day to the attendees of the meeting. There was a little bit of a delay after the 16th, but they were subsequently circulated. We've tried to provide the best minutes for these meetings that we can. We're actually audited by the Sports Ground Safety Authority on the way that we administer the SAG, and they have previously recognised the quality of the way in which we manage these processes. But if the minutes are not adequate for these purposes, then all I can do is apologise.
Could you send us we understand that they are filmed, and it'd be helpful for us to have a better picture if you could send us the films.
We could certainly undertake to provide that to the committee.
Okay, thank you. So we can have a context of who you are and what your responsibilities are. Could you set out the legal position of your council's responsibilities in relation to the attendance or non-attendance of away fans and how their safety is managed?
If I may just say something by way of opening, and then I'll hand over to Tony and to Richard to pick up some of those details. Obviously, I did also share a written statement with members of the committee prior to this session, just to set out the context of the role of the Safety Advisory Group, my specific role as the leader of the council, and of course the timeline of events as I understand them. I also just want to make it clear I'm not a member of the Safety Advisory Group myself. I had no role to play in the deliberations of that group. That is a separate operational role. I've also been clear that I respect the operational independence of the advisory group and indeed of West Midlands Police. I wish the Safety Advisory Group had been able to take a different position to the one that it took. I've made that publicly clear, and I note the Chief Constable referred to that in terms of the interaction I had with him in the run-up to these events. I am absolutely clear that I want Birmingham to be a place where people can come and attend football matches freely without fear of harassment or discrimination. That absolutely remains my view, and I'm absolutely clear that we have to have a robust, independent Safety Advisory Group process. I also am clear that whilst I'm the political leader of the council and took a very clear line on the fact that I thought this was not the position I wished to see, it is not my role as the leader of the council. It would be inappropriate for me to interfere in an operational matter and on a process that is led by the evidence that statutory partners, including the police, place before it. But I will ask Tony just set out some of the understanding of the legal position as well with regard to the SAG.
Yeah, in relation to the SAG, obviously they were a recommendation from the Taylor report following Hillsborough and other tragedies. The actual purpose of the SAG is in relation to providing specialist advice to the authority in terms of ground safety, and that obviously includes fans' attendance at the ground. So they provide specialist advice, which is why you have the specialist agencies such as the police, the fire service, all that contributing to the SAG to formulate the advice. The advice is then given to which it was in this case, to the event organiser. In this case it was Aston Villa Football Club. My understanding is that if there's a disagreement about the advice that's being given, it is then for the council, and that falls within Richard's sphere, to actually see whether or not there needs to be action taken in relation to the safety certificate encompassing that ground, in this case Aston Villa. So that's how any prohibition or restriction would be imposed upon the safety certificate in relation to fans' attendance, for example.
And should the SAG take responsibility or take account of any reputational risk to the UK, not just Birmingham, of any decision of banning fans from another nation to an environment of such, in particular in an environment where there's such an international tension?
I think the SAG's primary role is about safety at sports grounds, which is why there was a recommendation to actually bring those in. They're obviously chaired by the local authority, which was a recommendation within the Taylor report. So I think the predominant focus of the SAG must be a dissemination of information between the people who deal with risks such as public safety, in other words the police who've given evidence earlier today. So I think the primary focus must be dissemination of information for members of the SAG to formulate the best advice possible based on all the evidence, with the focus being on safety.
So obviously you're taking account of the threat perspective, and what you've circulated in the public domain is a redacted account of what you thought the threat perspective is, and I want to question why you've redacted that when it says the threat to the Jewish community is medium, Muslim community low, Christian community low, black community low, Villa community low, Maccabi high, pro-Palestinian medium threat on a higher scale in terms of fixtures this year. Why was that redacted? What reputational damage would it have done to the authority by redacting that?
I can't speak about the specific redaction. We have specialist advisors who advise on issues of freedom of information requests, which deal with in terms of the legislation and also the exemptions that were permitted to apply. That was looked at in terms of the information in conjunction with the people responsible for holding that information. We also take representations from the people who provided the information to authorities such as partnering agencies such as the police, and then a decision will be made in relation to disclosure of that information. I can't specifically comment on that, but I will have a look at that and provide information to the committee if that is required.
Can I jump in there? Can I push you on that point? Because the threat levels weren't redacted from the third SAG. Does that strike you as curious? They're redacted from the first SAG and not the second and third SAG minutes?
Again, I'd have to go back and actually look at the
But
basis
what's
of
your professional
redaction.
view? Does it not seem strange that threat levels are redacted in the first minutes, but not the third minutes?
I suppose what I would say, I don't know the specific reason for the redactions, but you'd obviously expect some consistency. So if that happened, yes, I would be surprised.
So I know, Mr. Cotton, Councillor Cotton, you've concerned about the reputational damage it's done to your city, and I'm sure you're concerned about the risk it now faces for people in the Jewish community and potential people who come to, Birmingham University's got the highest JSOC in the country. What threat does this pose to them now that this decision has been taken?
Well, you're absolutely correct that the reason why I made the statement I did in my response to the Chief Constable when he advised me that would be the proposal they were putting to the Safety Advisory Group, and the reason I made the public statement when these matters went into the public domain was exactly that. I'm a very proud Brummy. I'm born and bred in Birmingham. I've lived my entire life there. I am very proud of the fact it's a diverse city. It's a place where people of all faiths and none, all ethnicities make their home, and I want it to be a welcoming and inclusive place. And anything that detracts from that is a concern for me, which is why I raised those issues. We have a very strong tradition of interfaith working in Birmingham that goes back some 30 years now. We have some very vibrant community engagement that we do with communities in the city, including our Jewish community. We also have a good working relationship with the Community Security Trust. We are currently developing our anti-Semitism strategy for the city, which will draw on the government's national anti-Semitism strategy that's been brought forward as well. I am absolutely clear as the leader of this council that we will do everything that we need to do to ensure that people of this city, from the Jewish community and from all communities, can feel safe and supported.
Jeremy.
Can I just come in there? It's relevant. Have you adopted the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism? Has the council?
Yes, we adopted that, I think, you'll need to check the record, but I think it was around 2017, 2018. That was done by means of a vote through full council.
Okay, I'll come back to that later, if that's okay.
So, as a council, clearly there's levels of risk, and you can take the decision that you just don't want no disorder whatsoever, which probably means you never put a football match on again, or you manage the risk. What's your risk appetite here? Because you wanted the away fans to be able to attend. Were you prepared to accept some form of disorder as a result of that?
So my view on this was that I did not want a message being sent out about this city not being a welcoming and inclusive place, and I was very concerned that such a decision to ban away fans would absolutely communicate that position to the world, and that's not a message I want conveyed around Birmingham. I think when it comes to the specifics of safety and risk, that is absolutely rightly considered in the forum of a safety advisory group, and you want the professional expertise and perspective to inform that decision. It shouldn't be informed on sort of external political perspective. So my view of that would be it'd be very difficult for a safety advisory group to take a decision having received sort of clear assessment from the police and others around what they perceive the risk to be, and I don't believe that any council leader would be in a position where they would go against very serious advice that was coming forward in that forum. So I think there's an important balance to be struck there.
Was it made clear to you that there were mitigations that could have been put in place, as Lord Mann had recommended?
So I had asked, the timeline of events was that I received a message from the Chief Constable on the 8th of October, advising that would be the advice that was given to the Safety Advisory Group. I responded, as has already been alluded to say I thought that was not going to send a positive message about Birmingham. However, I do respect operational independence of these matters. I then, on the 9th of October, asked to meet with officers supporting the Safety Advisory Group so I could assure myself of two things. One was that the processes were being correctly followed in terms of how the Safety Advisory Group operates, and also just to question how are we absolutely clear on the risk assessment that's been brought forward by the police and other partners. And that I think was an appropriate thing for me to do as leader.
You were given the intelligence that was used to make the decision. Were you able to see any other forms of intelligence?
I was given the high-level readout on what was being provided to the Safety Advisory Group. I was very clear that I shouldn't get into the minutiae or detail of the Safety Advisory Group meetings. I think they have to be led by the evidence based on the partners around the table.
Were you aware that the peer review had recommended that the least worst solution would be away fans with reduced allocation?
That was not something I was aware of at that point, but I had asked the reason I was asking questions was because I wanted to ensure that had all options been looked at.
Yeah, of course, Robin.
Just saying you sought reassurance as part of the process that the procedure had been undertaken appropriately, but were you reassured?
So I continued to ask questions on the back of that meeting, and indeed, as you'll have seen, there was then further correspondence between the council and the police through officer channels, and of course there was a further meeting of the Safety Advisory Group that took place. My principal concern here was that we were taking a decision that did not detract from the reputation of the city, and I fear that the reputation of the city has been affected by the manner in this was handled.
Sorry to just ask the question again. Were you reassured that the process had been followed?
I was reassured that process with regard to the operation of the Safety Advisory Group had been absolutely followed. Obviously, I've followed with interest the proceedings this afternoon regarding some of the information that was provided to that Safety Advisory Group, and I'm sure that the committee will draw its conclusions on that in due course.
And what about the interaction between central and local government? Because clearly one of the things that has been the Baroness Casey review put forward, and something we will consider as a committee, is where central government should get involved and whether there was more of a role for central government. Do you have any views on that?
I think certainly when you've got issues of national interest, and this clearly became an issue of national interest, there needs to be interaction between the local authorities and central government, but both need to inform each other over the handling of something it becomes about the UK's reputation as well as the city's reputation. So I'll be very interested to see what comes forward in terms of recommendations to yourself in that regard.
Thank you. Cola.
Thank you. I am very concerned about these redactions. There's only 2 substantive redactions in all the minutes. They're in the first SAG. The first one is with regard to one which has been said, meant and threat to the local Jewish community. In the third set of minutes, the threat, as I've said, is not redacted, although the reference to the Jewish community is missing. There's also an inaccuracy that the first minutes say the threat to the Muslim community is low. Those are summarised in the third minutes as being medium, so they're inaccurate. The redaction is bizarre because the same thing has been redacted in one and not the other. The other substantive redaction is the one with regard to the police intelligence or lack of. There's in absence of intelligence based on conversations with peers and my professional judgment, there's no concerns with Villa fans, etc., etc. That's been redacted. Can you think of any legal reason why that should be redacted?
The 2 bases for redaction was one, first involving individuals' personal data, which is probably obvious from the redactions. The second redactions was in relation to law enforcement issues after the police and national intelligence. So that's why my understanding is why the redactions were applied.
Basically, a lack of intelligence. It's not simply to avoid political embarrassment.
Not as far as I'm aware. I think it was done on the basis of the exemptions that were felt to be rightly applicable.
And can you come back to us on both those redactions
Yes.
and the inconsistency?
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you. When you knew the Chief Constable, or when you knew that there was going to be a recommendation to ban the away fans, how strongly did you discuss this with the Chief Constable? How far did it get, this conversation?
So I responded to a text message I received from the Chief Constable on the 8th of October to say that, as I set out earlier, that I thought this was a decision that would reflect badly on the city. I thought it was the wrong decision. However, I also emphasised in that message that I respected the operational independence of the police and of the Safety Advisory Group. That was the message I very clearly conveyed back to the Chief at that point.
And did you go outside the city politically? Did you address this nationally?
No, my view was very straightforward, that it was for the Safety Advisory Group to act on the basis of the intelligence and information that was put before it by statutory partners. I thought it would be inappropriate for me as a politician to start to step into that space, having already conveyed my concerns around the wider impact that it would have upon the city.
And what about this from the resource perspective? Because there's an issue of resources in addressing these risks. Was there not an element there where you could talk to one's political masters in Whitehall?
Well, again, I would have expected such conversations to be part of, based on information and intelligence that went to the Safety Advisory Group. We have a long-established process that the Safety Advisory Group considers those with the appropriate professionals sat around the table and then would come forward with recommendations and proposals. I thought it would be crossing the line, frankly, from the point of view of my responsibility to step into that space. I thought the process should be followed, and I'm sure the process was in terms of the group itself.
And did you quiz them as to the process having been followed, or did you assume it had happened?
No, I asked a series of specific questions. Actually, when this process started, I must admit my knowledge of safety advisory groups and the whole process was somewhat limited. It was not something I'd come into contact with, so I had to learn a number of things. Yeah. Yes, exactly. So and the reason I convened that meeting with officers on the 9th was actually to understand what's the role of the safety advisory group, where does this fit in terms of the legal framework, what is the appropriate process to be followed in these circumstances. I was assured that the appropriate process was being followed from the point of view of the City Council as the convener of the safety advisory group. Clearly that safety advisory group can only act on the basis of the information that's placed in front of it, and that I think is probably the issue that we're teasing out here this afternoon.
Thank you. Jenny Reid.
Thank you. I asked earlier about whether your local authority had adopted the IHRA definition. You said yes, which is nice to hear. But I think you're right. I think that this incident has damaged the reputation of Birmingham as a whole, and it's allowed people to spread myths about Israelis being uniquely evil and unable to come here and behave properly in the UK. But do you think that it is appropriate for councillors who have predetermined views, anti-Semitic views, to sit on the SAG and be part of this decision-making process? And yeah, that's the first question.
I suppose that there were two points that come out of that question. One is the role of elected members and whether they should indeed sit on safety advisory groups. Now, Birmingham's unusual but not unique in that respect, and we'll come back to that because I do have some views on that. The points around any member participating in a safety advisory group meeting, or indeed any other meeting, I would expect them to abide by the code of conduct, and I would expect them to abide by declaring any interests or issue that had arisen that would be seen potentially to prejudice their judgment. And I note that on the agenda for the safety advisory group, there was a point at which people were expected to disclose any prejudicial interest. I think that's absolutely right and proper.
It wasn't in this case, was it?
So my understanding is that the 24th of October, where a decision was taken, there were disclosures were made. One member recused themselves from the meeting on that basis.
I know you're not. I'm not going to push this because I appreciate that that's not your that's not your responsibility. Yeah. However, what is your responsibility, in my understanding, and I've got a question for you in a minute, is that as your fellow councillors, firstly, if you'd adopted the IHRA, where they're making anti-Semitic statements and generalisations on Twitter and in public meetings, that is a problem. So what action do you think what action should be taken as a result of that? And then secondly, how did these councillors find themselves on this committee, and why was it felt that it was appropriate that someone with these views would be making a decision of this nature?
So I would expect any member who participates in any meeting to declare interest appropriately, and I would expect them to abide by the Council Code of Conduct and indeed any commitments that we've collectively made as a council, including respect for the IHRA, which, as I say, we passed in 2017. We have a disciplinary and standards machinery that can deal with breaches of those nature, and I would expect, if there were those issues, that to be pursued through those mechanisms.
Are there any ongoing investigations into the conduct of those councillors on the SAG?
I am not aware of any such at the moment, but obviously the standards process is separate to my role as leader of the council. I think that's right as well.
Who appoints the members of the SAG, councillor members of the SAG?
Councillor members of the SAG are appointed by full council at the annual general meeting.
It's correct. I mean, formally, the councillor representatives on the SAG used to be appointed by the Licensing and Public Protection Committee, and I think there was a report in April 2019 from the then Assistant Director questioning whether or not councillors should actually be on the SAG at all. What happened as a result of that later in 2019, a decision was taken that councillors who sat on the SAG should be appointed by full council itself. They were appointed on the basis of one representative of 3 of the main political parties and 1 ward member for the area covered by the Safety Advisory Committee, I presume with the intention that they could contribute to any local issues that arose within the community. So that's in essence, they are selected through the annual governance process of the council in selecting who sits on what committee.
So did you have any discussions at any point which recognised that there were councillors, some of your councillors, who were campaigning publicly to not just ban away from fans but stop the match in its entirety? Did that at any point come to you as leader of the council?
No, that didn't come to me.
So you didn't see the tweets
leader.
From your account? No.
No, I wasn't aware of specific tweets. I tried to stay away from Twitter, to be honest with you, these days as much as possible. But no, I was not aware of that position.
Okay. I ask your... Sorry, I missed the very beginning of the meeting. Are you the legal counsel?
No, excuse me, I'm the Executive Director of City Operations, so I'm responsible for the part of the council that administers the SAG and also the licensing function which regulates the ground.
Legal counsel.
Sorry. So can I ask about predetermination? So for my sins, I used to be a councillor and I chaired a planning committee for a number of years, and predetermination was obviously a really important principle in local government. Is that applicable to the SAG?
SAG in essence is not a decision-making body, it's actually a body that provides advice, but I think any council has a really strongly opposed view where it would impact upon their ability to actually reach a fair decision based on the fact, should actually consider whether or not they should be sitting within a committee. And I probably don't need to tell you this from what you're saying, there's a difference between being predisposed to something as opposed to predetermining something.
I completely agree with you. So in that case, do you think it was appropriate that councillors who were campaigning publicly to stop the football game in its entirety, that were on the SAG, which made the decision to ban away fans? Is that legally appropriate and morally appropriate?
I think there's a number of things in answering that. I think each individual member of a committee, councillor or otherwise, actually has to take a personal decision as to whether or not they can make an informed decision based on anything without predetermining something. Certainly the terms of reference of the SAGs actually say that there should be there is a question raised about whether or not there is a conflict of interest or issues such as predetermination. On the agenda of the SAG meeting that took place on the 24th of October, there was quite specific advice given in relation to people declaring interest, and as the leader has already said, I understand that one councillor did recuse themselves based upon...
After the decision was made. After the decision was made.
Based upon previous social media posts, and it was emphasised on there that, and I think it would be an unfair expectation of the chair of that committee to trawl through every social media post that someone's done. So it's very much a personal obligation on the individual involved.
I do think, I appreciate that you don't want to trawl through people's social media. I mean, who would want to do that? However, in a case like this that has such huge public scrutiny on it, were you not concerned that such councillors were sitting on that had sat on the SAG and that they went to a meeting and then recused themselves, rather than you taking the kind of moral and leadership role of removing them from the committee?
I mean, I would expect any member who had a perceived conflict of interest to take that on their own responsibility to remove themselves from such a meeting. If I'd been in that position myself, I would certainly have recused myself from a meeting.
Mr. Brooks.
Could I come in on this?
Yes.
So just in relation to these 4 meetings, I think it's useful to be clear about the sequence of events and the involvement of the individual councillors. So the 7th of October meeting did not provide advice. It established the planning assumption but did not provide advice. So there were 2 councillors present at that, and I think we accept that they should have declared interests, but they did not. At the next meeting, the 16th of October, advice was provided, the advice that there should be no away fans, but that advice was provided unanimously by all of the partner members of the Safety Advisory Group. So I think that is significant in relation to the involvement of the two councillors, and there was an opportunity for them to express dissent. The 24th meeting is then when I think we get it right, where we have declarations of interest and recusation.
I think it's clear that very serious error of judgment here, which has really harmed the confidence of the Jewish community in Birmingham, that such people with such predetermined views of the Jewish community and of Israelis were allowed to be involved in that committee meeting. And I'd encourage you to kind of reflect on that and think about it. That's all I've got at the moment.
I've got Peter Prinsley and then I've got Joe.
Thank you. I'm Peter Prinsley. I'm sorry I was a bit delayed. I was trying to get a Holocaust memorial debate agreed. I'm the MP for Bury St Edmunds and Stowmarket. So I've been listening to this, and I'd like to ask really a question similar to the question I asked the police officers before. So the thing is, the SAG, as everybody has said, it can act on the intelligence that it receives. But actually what it's doing, it's acting on its interpretation of the intelligence that it receives. And the question really is what is the risk of this being politically prejudiced? Because that appears to be a belief that is held by many. And so my question is, how could this be realistically refuted? If I were to say to you, my belief is that there was political prejudice on that safety advisory group on your council, and you, first of all, failed to notice it, and secondly, if you had noticed it, you didn't do anything about it. And this resulted in the advice to ban a match. And from what we've been hearing about all of this over more than one session now, is it seems that there was a great deal of confused information which is being fed into the SAG, but there is a suspicion also that there was a predetermination, and some of the information was therefore changed in order to fit with the predetermined decision. That is the belief, I believe, of many of the members of the Birmingham Jewish community, and it is that needs to be addressed.
I mean, from my perspective, and I'll ask Mr Brooks to pick up on some of the detail around the operation of the Safety Advisory Group in this context. From my perspective, and actually having listened to the earlier discussion here this afternoon, I think the Safety Advisory Group can only operate effectively in an atmosphere of candour and of confidence in the material that's placed before it. And that the judgment then has to be made on the basis of the material that's placed before it. But I think there is clearly some concern around the information that's placed before that group. I don't expect everybody around that Safety Advisory Group table to be subject matter experts or indeed try and second guess, particularly around police intelligence. But my overall reflection would be, unless you've got some candour and some confidence in what's placed before you, you then run into some difficulties. But Richard, I'd ask you to pick up perhaps some more operational detail on that.
Well, I can only agree that the Safety Advisory Group relies upon the expert input of its members, in particular of their risk assessments. It does not make a fresh interpretation of the evidence. It's not competent to do so. Just as the SAG would not be, the Safety Advisory Group members would not be competent to investigate the building safety advice or the fire safety advice. In this case, public safety decision relied extremely heavily on the expert evidence provided by the police.
Yeah. Would you agree with me that these are a really poor set of minutes? Firstly, there's no data regarding the information coming from the police. Secondly, the only opinions that are recorded are that of councillors who are opposed to fans coming to Aston Villa and repeating concerns of the community who want it stopped. Quote. the fact that these councillors have already campaigning in the public arena for the match not to have Maccabi fans in attendance, would you say that there's a breach in Nolan principles?
May I start against?
Do you want to pick up on the minutes?
I mean, I firmly believe that the officers who were administering these meetings were trying their very best to apply the Nolan principles, and in particular to act in the public interest and objectively. Now, the minutes are summary minutes of long meetings. These are 2-hour-long meetings with 30 plus participants. And it's very difficult to capture all of the detail of those meetings. But
there's a complete absence of the intelligence provided by the police, so that we as HAS members have been unable to gain a true picture of exactly what was discussed. These minutes are now out in the public arena, so the whole of the country be studying them, and what's being recorded here is not, we understand now, is not a true picture of what was being informed to the meeting. And then you're getting commentary from councillors who do not want Maccabi fans to attend the match. So we're getting a very biased picture from these minutes. Would you agree with me?
I don't think I can agree that it's a biased picture in the minutes. It may be an incomplete picture and not a perfect record of the meeting, but it is our best attempt to provide an accurate summary of what was discussed at the meeting.
In my view, it's not. We're getting an inaccurate picture, an understanding of exactly what was agreed at that meeting.
I think the fundamental point in which the decision was made, which is the police intelligence, I mean, it's a genuine question. How can that not be included in the minutes? I can't get my head around that.
I don't quite follow when you say the police intelligence.
The police intelligence, which everyone has told us, informed the decision to ban the away fans. How can that not be included in the minutes? Now, it's not redacted. It's not there, and yet we have the kind of anti-Semitic ramblings of a far left councillor.
When you say the intelligence, do you mean the actual intelligence reports? For example,
anything.
So in advance of the 16th, as you've already discussed as a committee, we wrote as a council to West Midlands Police asking them to set out their reasoning for their risk assessment, which I think was a proper thing for us to do. And in advance of the meeting on the 24th, we wrote to them, and this is unusual practice for safety advisory group meetings, that's not normally done. We wrote to all of the partners asking them to set out their evidence in advance of that meeting, and again the police
Why
did that.
wouldn't it? I mean, why isn't it in the minutes?
Even just noted as intelligence can be found at Appendix C or whatever it might be.
We decided to ban the away fans because they had a conversation on the phone.
All I can understand is that two councillors agreed that the away fans shouldn't be in attendance. And so from my understanding of the minutes is that this is pressure that's come from two councillors rather than intelligence that's been provided by the police. So you have here a biased set of minutes that's inaccurate and is giving us a false picture of exactly what went on in those meetings.
I mean, what I'd say is I wasn't at any of the SAG meetings,
The police.
and I think, well, it's an actual, that is fact. I wasn't at the meetings. What I would say in relation to minutes, they're never a verbatim record of what has been said in a meeting. It depends off. A lot of this depends on the skill of the actual person taking the minutes to encapsulate the relevant gist of the conversation and what was taken into account in terms of reaching any conclusion. Obviously, it's the same with council minutes for council meetings. We're obviously aided now by the fact that a lot of meetings, including this one, are actually televised and recorded, so there is an actual verbatim record. And as I understand what was said earlier, if there is a verbatim record of that meeting, it should be made available to the committee, because then you actually have the total record of the meeting. I'd be loath to say that minutes are biased in essence. It may depend on the actual person taking the minutes themselves.
I think you can see the frustration we have, because on face value, reading those minutes, it doesn't correlate with other things that we've been told.
I fully accept the frustration of the committee, which has come through in the previous evidence-giving session, and now this. As I say, a minute will never be a totally accurate record of a conversation, which is why I think actually if there is a verbatim record, it should be before the committee.
That's what's really helpful. In defence of the minute taker, it does record the fact there was no intelligence, and maybe that is the answer. We will find out when we hear the minutes.
Yeah. And I think, go back to the primary purpose here, which you, Councillor Cotton, have set out. The confidence of the Jewish community in Birmingham and the confidence of Jewish people to be in Birmingham, visit Birmingham and enjoy Birmingham is paramount here. And these minutes do not give that. I'm going to move on to Robbie Moore.
Just to stick with the two councillors and following on from Janie Reid's question about conflicts of interest, predetermined decision-making, prejudged views. What's the disciplinary process associated when there's that level of concern that's clearly been made?
Well, the disciplinary process would be, there's a number of methods, and as people will probably know in this committee, the issue of member conduct is being debated, as particularly in relation to the sanctions available in the standards regime in general, and I think the government have been making consultations.
How at Birmingham City Council is the disciplinary process triggered?
Well, I wouldn't class it as a disciplinary process. What I'd say is you have the councillor conduct and a standards regime. So you have the councillor code of conduct, which all councils have, their locally agreed codes of conduct, and then actual individual members are subject to that code, and if they fall short of the code, sanctions can be applied for any breach of the code.
Has that been triggered in relation to these two councillors?
It will only be triggered if there is a written complaint in relation to the specific conduct of members.
Here we are, nationally, concerns being raised. Councillor Cotton, have you raised these concerns and triggered this process?
I have not raised a concern with standards at this point. Because I've not been had placed in front of me a complaint of the nature.
You're clearly here raising concerns. You've said yourself in this meeting that you've got concerns around the views that were expressed. You acknowledge that you haven't seen tweets, etc., but you've expressed views. Mr Brooks has also said and raised concerns, but yet this disciplinary process or actions against those two councillors has not been triggered. I don't understand why not, if you're really wanting to protect the reputation of Birmingham City Council.
I would like to reflect, given what I've heard today at this committee and some of the issues that have emerged, on what the appropriate next steps would be. I don't want to prejudge any standards process, but I think it's important that I reflect on what I've heard from the committee here today.
So just going on to community impact assessment issues, what was your assessment of the advice from the SAG on the level of risks to different communities in Birmingham and to the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans? And can you explain why the level of risk changed over the course of time in some cases?
I'm not sure we can, because I don't think that's the process for the SAG. I think the SAG has to accept the risk assessment on the basis of the assessment by the relevant competent partner. It did not. We didn't.
No view on that.
We had a view in the sense that we wanted to know how to respond to it appropriately, and one of the important purposes is to enable the whole range of partners, fire service, traffic, etc., all to coordinate around the event as it is ultimately operationally planned, and that's what we did here.
How did and maybe this is for you, Councillor Cotton, as well, how did the council seek to communicate the decision with of the SAG ultimately with those in the community that were being impacted by the decision?
That would have been via the letter that the chair of the SAG had communicated to Aston Villa in the first instance, wasn't it?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. So so the Aston Villa Football Club is one of the sort of the two prime recipients of the advice of the Safety Advisory Group, the other being the council itself in its licensing function and other statutory functions. But the chair of the SAG wrote after both the 16th of October Safety Advisory Group meeting and the 24th with the outcome to Aston Villa Football Club.
So just written correspondence, no physical engagement or conversations or...
They were in the meeting.
Fine.
So Aston Villa Football Club had multiple representatives qualified professional representatives in the Safety Advisory Group meeting.
And how have you, obviously there's been quite a lot of damage, community tensions have been raised. How as a council have you sought to reassure the Jewish community within Birmingham beyond the ultimate decision that was made and the months that have passed since?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there's ongoing engagement with all of our communities, including the Jewish community. As a council, as has been referred to, we adopted the IHRA declaration some years ago. We promote and support Jewish community events. We have, like many other councils do, a Hanukkah celebration, for instance, which I attended in December. We annually commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day, but we also have alongside that the ongoing engagement with local Jewish organisations. There's the work that we're doing around the development of our new anti-Semitism strategy, which I think is really important. And it's important that's aligned with the national strategy as well. And it also builds on the tradition of interfaith working that we've had in this city over many years, something which I think is very, very important in a city as diverse as ours.
Thank you.
Joe White.
Yes, the police earlier reported that they had picked up through different inquiries that there was proposals for people to arm themselves and to attack the Israeli fans should they come to the city of Birmingham. Was that fed up to the highest level of the authority? Because obviously that's a serious safety concern that you as an authority should be monitoring and be working with the police on.
As the political leader of the council, that was not made clear to me. I don't know whether there's anything from an operational point of view that's communicated through.
So in this case, I think it's clear that the police have primary responsibility for public safety and law enforcement in relation to issues such as that. What we do have responsibility for is resilience and emergency planning. So in the event of an attack presenting wider threats, then we would activate our emergency procedures. But that was not this sort of issue.
I've served as a councillor for many years at senior level, and the security of my community is a number one priority. And if any intelligence had come through from any committee, then at a senior level we'd have been working very closely with the police to manage that.
Let me be absolutely clear, if such a thing had been communicated to me, I would have done exactly the same as you would have done when you were a senior councillor as well.
Paul Connor.
Councillor Cotton, your letter tells us that in the SAG meeting the 24th of October there's a new assessment starting afresh. Have you looked at the minutes? Do you think that's what happened? Because it looks just like they reconfirmed their previous decision.
Well, I'll refer you back to my earlier answer on this, which is to say that clearly the Safety Advisory Group has to act on the basis of the information and assessment that's placed in front of it. And I think as we've already heard how that process works, and that the Safety Advisory Group can't sort of second guess, particularly when it comes to police intelligence. I have concerns, particularly having heard the interactions here this afternoon around some of the information that was placed in front of that Safety Advisory Group. But I don't think it would be inappropriate for me or anybody else to try and second guess that. But I am concerned, given what I've heard here this afternoon.
But do you see? I know we will get a firmer view once we hear the actual recording. But do you get an impression from the minutes any really serious attempt was made to start afresh, or did they just rubber stamp what they'd already decided?
I mean, not having been a participant in that meeting, and simply based on the minutes, based on the evidence that set out in those minutes, I don't think I'm qualified to say to provide an in-depth commentary on what happened within that meeting. However, it is clear to me from the proceedings that are set out there that information was placed in front of the partners who sat around the Safety Advisory Group table, and that they reached a conclusion based on the intelligence that was placed before them.
The Maccabi fans not taking up the tickets, or the Maccabi club not taking up the tickets, what effect did that have on in the context within Birmingham?
So clearly, the decision not to take the ticket, I think it's important to remember that the Safety Advisory Group doesn't take a decision, it provides advice And actually the formal role of the Safety Advisory Group is if advice is not then acted upon, the council then needs to reflect on whether it uses its powers in terms of amending the safety certificates. I think it's important that we need to understand that that's how the process plays out. It is an advisory group rather than a decision making forum. Clearly the decision of Maccabi Tel Aviv not to take tickets somewhat changed the dynamic there, because there was then no decision or advice to be complied with or decision to be taken. My principal concern, though, was coming back to the overall position at the start, which was to say, look, I do think that if we are saying that we cannot allow away fans of a football team to come into Birmingham and safely participate in a sporting event, and if that's then perceived as being a sense of discrimination or targeting of one community, that is not acceptable. That is not acceptable, and that was my concern right from the outset with the implications of that advice being provided.
We've heard the decision to ban away fans increase the threat to the Muslim community from right-wing extremists. Was this something you discussed with the parties?
So I was incredibly concerned when I learned that was the advice that was going to be provided to the Safety Advisory Group, because I think a lot of what then subsequently unfolded was quite predictable in terms of right-wing extreme actors stepping into that space and using the situation in Birmingham to pursue their own divisive agendas. I think that was predictable, and that was exactly what was in my mind when I expressed the concerns that I did.
And you expressed that danger to people.
Yeah, I was very clear from the outset that this was a likely consequence of what would happen if that decision was to be taken.
Thank you.
Joe White.
Yes, thank you. You said obviously you suddenly had to become very knowledgeable about SAGs and the decision-making process around the Maccabi Tel Aviv match. What police intelligence were you provided with as part of that briefing?
I was given the high-level readout at that meeting on the 9th of October around what had been provided at that point to the Safety Advisory Group, and also the day before I received a message from the Chief Constable conveying that would be the recommendation they were putting forward based on concerns over what had happened in Holland.
So it's the Dutch experience, not the threat.
There was in the message that was sent to me by the chief. It was based on concerns around what had happened in Holland. That they were the recommendation would be to the Safety Advisory Group not to invite the away fans. And then I subsequently responded by saying, whilst I am not going to get involved in your operational detail, would be wrong for me to do so, I do think that is a wrong decision for the city because of the message it sends out about Birmingham.
So the police did not inform you of the potential threat to Israeli fans by armed groups?
I was not told anything around armed groups or anything of that nature, and if anybody had mentioned the prospect of armed groups, I obviously would have responded quite vociferously, because I think something of that nature is clearly a massive concern that needs to be addressed.
A bit more.
Councillor Cotton, I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked the policing minister and also the Deputy Mayor for Policing at the last session that we had. You've raised a huge level of concern around the amount of intelligence that was given to the SAG, the advice that was given to the SAG for the decision to be made, predominantly by West Midlands Police, the damage that ultimately this decision has cost your city and its reputation as being a welcoming city. Do you have confidence in the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police?
I mean, it's ultimately not for me to take decisions on those matters. That is a matter for the Police and Crime Commissioner. What I will say is, particularly having heard the discussions here this afternoon, I do have concerns around the quality of material that was provided and the provenance of material that was provided to the Safety Advisory Group. That group can only work on the basis, as I said earlier, of candour and confidence in the material that's placed before it. And I think, I have serious questions that I would like to see addressed as a result of this inquiry.
Does it concern you that we've had to bring before us the Chief Constable in front of this committee not once but twice, and have to get the Chief Constable to say to us that he's going to have to come back to us with even more information to provide clarity on questions that can't be answered?
I think it's very important that we have absolute clarity over what happened in the timeline of events leading up to the Maccabi Tel Aviv Villa match. I think it's right and proper that you are holding to account in that way. I ultimately come back to the point that the reflection that this puts upon my city, a city that I'm very proud to call home, that is an absolute paragon when it comes to diversity of its communities. This reflects poorly on Birmingham, and this is something that I want to see addressed, because I have to tell you, as a proud Brummie, it is a place that includes all communities. It is a place that's full of vibrancy and life. That's the Birmingham I want to be talking about. I don't really want to be in front of a committee this afternoon talking about issues that detract from the impression of Birmingham, but I think it's right and proper that there is clarity around what happened and that people have the answers that they need.
The West Midlands MP, I will concur that we absolutely, no, I'm not West Midlands police area, but I'm a West Midlands MP, and I would concur that we do need a strong and vibrant Birmingham where everybody feels safe. Thank you so much for your responses to our questions. There are clearly a number of matters for the committee to consider, and we will stay behind now to consider some further points and what our next steps will be. But I'm incredibly grateful for you both attending and also being prepared to stay later than your allocated time. Thank you so much. Order.